Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you are a returning listener, subscriber, so glad to have you here. If you are new to the channel and you do like what you hear, please, on your way out, please hit the like and subscribe button. It's a passive gesture that goes a very long way. Let's get into the topic at hand with our guest today. Controlled opposition. Here in the United States and throughout the Western world, protests, school walkouts, and boycotts have erupted in response to Israel's relentless assault on the people of Gaza. The conflict has been raging for almost a year, yet in this election cycle, the pressing issue of which candidate will work towards brokering a peace deal or ceasefire in the region has not taken center stage in the debates. While protests continue, the encampments have been cleared out, and the conversation around President Biden, dubbed Genocide Joe by some critics, has been muted by the hope of another Trump defeat, this time at the hands of Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. This raises a critical question. Are these protests merely cathartic exercises that give the illusion of challenging the political hegemony of the two flanks of Capitol? Our guest today, who goes by the internet moniker One Dime, believes that much of what we perceive as agitation is actually controlled opposition. According to this perspective, the presence of law enforcement at these protests is not due to fear of uprising, but to protect physical property and create an illusion of conflict. Join us as we delve into this provocative analysis with One Dime, exploring the true impact of protests and whether they genuinely challenge the status quo or serve as a safety valve for public dissent. Please welcome, coming all the way live from the eastern end of Canada, Tony of One Dime.
What's up? Toronto.
It's been a while since you've been on the show, about at least a year.
At least almost 2 years. Yeah, I think it was a lot of fun. It was a total mess, though.
It's been almost 2 years.
Yeah, I think so.
So, are you 20 now?
I'm 27.
What'd you say?
I'm 27.
But slow down, Grandpa. I'm 20 years older than you.
That's wild.
In like 3 weeks. Yeah.
You don't look it.
Well, hey. Thank you. Oh no! What happened? You disappeared. There you go.
Okay, there you go.
Damn, the deep state was that mad at you?
You know, maybe this is why I should have not shown my face in my videos. I used to not, precisely because being taken seriously, right? I wanted the work to speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a baby face. So people knew I was young based on my voice, but listening, people guessed maybe like 30, 29. People think I'm like 21, 22. I'm like, okay.
How does
that's good in long term. I'll take it.
Yeah, But seriously, how does that make you feel in this space? Because you do have a growing following. Next week, I'm going to have another video essayist that I believe is even younger than you. A young man by the name of J-Reg is coming on.
Yo, he's my age.
Oh, you guys are the same age?
That's crazy. You're having J-Reg.
Yeah.
You live in the same city and we hang out.
Oh, you guys both are in. I don't want to say where you are. I don't know if you want to know. People know where you are. But
well, yeah, Toronto, Canada. But
it's a big city.
We don't live together.
How do you guys? It's funny that you say that because I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but I do think it's kind of important when it comes to being taken seriously. I worked in a different field when I was even younger than you, and I had hired someone that was much older and paid her to lie and say she was the face of the company to be taken seriously. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And I had Doug Lane on last week, and somehow you came up in the conversation and said, "Oh, I'm going to have this young man on." And Doug goes, "What is that? What is that kid, like 15?" He's just joking. But do older people try to poke at you maybe because you've grown faster than they have? And did they try to poke at some of these theories that you're coming up with? Do you find that?
I've noticed two different reactions. Like, It's really depends on whether the people have watched my videos or read my work or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ones who have, and then they know my age,
Mm-hmm.
they're generally really impressed, like, especially the older ones, especially some of the people who I think we're mutual friends with, like Mike Watson, for example.
Okay.
It kind of increased the level of respect, but, because they're like, "Oh, he's doing this at this age," but I really think it's not just age, it's how long have you been doing what you've been doing, which is, let's say, you're talking about theory, history,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. If you're a student of the game, what matters is how long and
Mm-hmm.
how dedicated you've been at that thing,
Mm-hmm.
and, I was reading since a very young age, like, I was reading at I think the first I remember it's very cliche, but the first political book I read was a Chomsky book, and I was, like, 15.
Okay.
And, I was very into that stuff for a while, so I had a lot of time to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know, a lot of Adderall too, like just end up reading a lot, so, I mean, I just kind of have an obsession with things. Once I learned them deeply, like, the Cultural Revolution, was basically me being so obsessed with learning about it, and then I had this written material, and I thought, "Why not make this into a video documentary?" So yeah, I mean, it's a barrier only with people who haven't really consumed. I guess
Mhm.
maybe Doug Lane. Doug Lane's an interesting character. I remember he called out Jonas Cheka, who's also a pretty known video essayist around my age.
Mhm.
He goes by the name CCK Philosophy.
Mhm.
I think he was like hitting on him once, and I don't know about Doug, man. I don't know about Doug Lane. I don't know what's up. I have nothing against diet soap. I
Hey,
actually listen to them.
all I'll say is talk to me when you're 50. I hope I'm still friends. I really do. I hope I was still able to talk to you. Talk to me when you're 50. It's not a defense of certain things. It's just,
Yeah, I'll be a boomer conservative.
well, it's just easy to be bitter and angry. I find myself bitter and angry all the time.
That's true, I do notice that, but I mean, it's better to be bitter and angry
Uh-huh.
and, like, not a total reactionary, because that's what happens to a lot of, like, former leftists, and I guess that's sort of the subject of what we're talking about today to a certain extent.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I did. You have a plethora of video essays, a lot more than you had when I first came across your channel. And now you're doing like interviews and stuff because, like you said, you're showing your face now. Um, so I found this one. And I apologize. I want to apologize on air in front of everybody. I had contacted you like over a month ago, trying to get this thing together. It's just been crazy on my back end. So again, so thankful for you to take your time and talk with me today. So hold on, I have all these questions ready for you. I think there's like 20. If we can hit at least 4 of them, I'll be happy. Um, can you explain what you mean by controlled opposition in the context of contemporary political movements and protests? How does this concept manifest in today's social and political climate? And I believe when you're talking about this, you're talking about it more from the US aspect.
I would say it's, a phenomenon that pertains to what we call liberal democracies, or what I prefer to call managed democracies,
Okay.
but, um,
And what do you mean
liberal
by managed
democracies, yeah.
democracies?
I think US is just the case I focus on because it's the one that people can most relate to and understand, because that's just due to the amount of inhabitants.
Mhm.
But I started studying the subject mainly because there's a lot of talk about controlled opposition, right, as a concept, and I wanted to study what the actual literature that existed, what it had to say on it, and it's
And
pretty it's very limited.
you went to the Frankfurt School route. You looked up the Marcuse.
Yeah, well, that was no, I wasn't a Marcuse, like, way before that,
Okay.
but
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
like, controlled opposition, right? It's a thing that we hear, and
Uh-huh.
it's pretty mainstream to talk about controlled opposition in the likes of Russia. I mean, Adam Curtis in the documentary, um,
Hypernormalization.
Hypernormalization, yeah, he talks about Putin, backing different protest groups against each other. And you have some people on the left on the very fringe, like you have this book called Who Paid the Piper, which is about the CIA Congress of Cultural Freedom, which talks about how certain side of left academics and journalists were backed by this group that was getting funding from the CIA. And I don't really like these narratives that much, because not to say that they don't have a kernel of truth, I don't think it really explains what happens in our societies as far as opposition goes, and why it's so limited and very tranquil. But so, like, the theory that I push in the video called controlled opposition, a theory. I use controlled opposition more for search engine optimization, to be honest, because the whole point of the video is really saying that um, what we have going on is not controlled opposition. We have something more akin to contained opposition. And I guess that's something of an important point of clarification, because control implies that it's being directed by a party or an apparatus, and the actions are actually, directed from somewhere. Whereas contained is to hold something within a confine, within a set of limits. Contained opposition isn't directed by anybody. It can be influenced, pushed a certain way. It can be caused by certain things, but contained opposition becomes contained by itself and due to structural forces. Now, that's a kind of sounds like a just jargon there, but I'll go deeper into what I mean. And first, I do want to say why I said this was a theory in the first place, because what I really wanted to do is I was looking desperately to see if anyone else had written a theory about this, so that I could just say it was theirs or just push it to something so it would be more legitimate. That's usually in academia. If you want to push a certain theory, it sells a lot it sells a lot more effectively if you say, oh, well, Foucault came up with this and I just got it from Foucault, or you just attach it to some big name. Thing is, I studied a lot of different theories, and there were theorists who understood what I'm talking about, and they had this understanding of power that was nuanced and explained the same phenomenon, like Zizek, and I talk about him in the video, and this idea of inherent transgression. But he doesn't actually flesh it into political theory that's specific at all, in terms of something that actually explains institutions and protests, and that isn't just vague. Thing about Zizek, it's really a psychoanalytic phenomenon he explains, whereby people essentially will transgress a law that is too heavily enforced, and people are going to transgress the law no matter what. So actually a more effective solution is to take the permissive liberal parent approach, as opposed to the strict parent approach where you lay down the iron law. That kind of intensifies it. I guess the simple way to put it is, like, in Victorian England, everyone was fucking, that didn't stop anybody. The church didn't stop anybody. But you have a system that allows for a degree of dissent. Now, applying this logic to protest, it is really hard to boil down. But the video called Controlled Opposition, a Theory goes over it. And that video is basically a more shortened down version of what is a more in-depth argument that I make in my dissertation, my master's dissertation from a couple of years ago, a year ago now. And I basically flesh this out even more in my upcoming book that I have with Revel Press, which I know you're collaborating with Mike Watson. It's called Liberal Totalitarianism, the Spectrum of Managed Democracy, and What Makes the U.S. Different. I added that as a sort of extra section of my dissertation it was the most speculative part, in the sense that it's the hardest thing to prove empirically, but it's more of a theory. I call it the a tentative theory for a reason. Like, it's something that I want other people to add to. I want people smarter than myself to research and develop into something more robust. I added that because I felt this was the main thing that Sheldon Wallen, the guy who I built on his theory of managed democracy, I felt like that was what he was missing, because he always ends his analysis with this idea of fugitive democracy. He thinks modern democracy is heavily limited in what is capable, and what you really have open is a space, is these moments of fugitive democracy, these ephemeral revolts, expressions of popular will, grievances of the unheard. He tends to kind of like fetishize this, and I really thought like, well, what is fugitive democracy? Like, how do you tell these days what is fugitive democracy? What is political revolt that actually seriously can disrupt the system, and what isn't? So that's what got me thinking. I started thinking of protests is not an exception to the rule of hegemony, but a part of that rule of hegemony, that it's an expression of a stronger power that allows for a certain degree of protests. Basically, that is how I first started thinking about it. And also to think of liberalism not just as a set of ideals, political ideals tied to a program, but as a style of governance. You have you have the tradition of realist thinkers who think this way. Like, of course, Machiavelli's very famous for that. But there's two things I was trying to do. I was trying to show that the reason you have the purpose that rights serve in liberal democracy, the function, the objective function, irrespective of like the rulers of that system, the function that it serves, it's not just like a system of free contestation where different political actors can voice their opinions and compete for political power. Now, to you, that's probably obvious that this isn't true because you've heard all the Marxist perspectives which critique liberal democracy and all that. To a lot of the audience, this will probably be obvious. To a lot of liberals, it is totally not. Now, why I don't deny the Marxist perspective. I think they're pretty much correct in most of the critique of liberal democracy. It doesn't explain a lot of modern phenomena. I'm trying to just explain the specificity of liberalism.
And I'm assuming you didn't read If We Burn by Vincent Bevins.
Yeah, actually, recently I didn't finish it though, but it's really interesting it's mostly about Brazil though.
No, it goes all over the world. Trust me. But it does.
Yeah,
it starts off in Brazil.
Actually, right when I released that video.
Say again.
I had that book recommended to me right when I released that video.
When I watched the video, I was like, "Oh, this kid didn't read Bevin's book." Not as a critique.
I'm curious to hear what you think.
It's a different approach. You guys are coming at it from two totally different angles. So, but I think his angle is very important because it's the history of the 2010s and what went on globally, and he takes out the United States context. He doesn't really talk about BLM protests whatsoever. It's all about it, and it starts with Brazil, and then he travels to, I think,
the Arab
Egypt. Yeah, the Arab Spring. He goes to China. He goes to Korea. He goes to Russia. There were tons of protests in the 2010s. I believe there's more protests in the 2010s than any other time in history. Massive protests, and they didn't really bear the fruit. And he kind of asked the question why. And I think you're just asking a very different question. But his book is
analyzing different things.
Yeah, and I think there would have been a complication maybe to what you were doing if you're reading his book. Complication in the sense of if you're just reading theory, this is like thoughts. He's going, this is what happened, and here's the people telling you their story because he said he did like 200 interviews. And
right. Yeah. Well, I would say we're analyzing different things because my video and what that theory being positioned is, it's not a polemic against protesting.
And I do want to say that you say in the video throughout that you are not against protesting.
Yeah, I think it's more trying to understand liberal democratic regimes and ways they ensure legitimacy, because what discerns like quote unquote radical protest from non-radical is a difficult question. And it's not so much what I'm trying to understand, because what I'm trying to get at are two different things: styles of governance, and to demystify liberal ideology in the way it legitimizes itself. Because liberals will often tell you, you have no real reason to want a radical overhaul of the system because you have the free right to protest. and you have the free right to democratically voice your concerns within the system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing about the democracy is more obvious to a lot of people today, that you don't really have that freedom, especially in a two-party duopoly like the States. The protesting part isn't so obvious, because whenever you hear people talk about the intensification of authoritarianism, the decline of democracy, they can typically only think in Orwellian terms. They can only think in a system that is more totalizing, that precludes protest, like a fascist system, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, someone in the comments just brought up Foucault. That's someone who I actually tried to turn to really see if I could kind of use what he was doing as a way to explain what I'm trying to explain. But
Didn't go far enough for you.
no, I mean, there's actual a large part of what I wrote was inspired by what I thought was an annoying Foucault quote that people like to bring up.
What is that?
So this is actually one of my supervisors. He was talking about why he doesn't believe totalitarianism is a thing.
Okay.
And he was saying, because where there is power, there is resistance. And this is a famous Foucault quote from The History of Sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is basically that, like, there's no system so totalizing that can preclude resistance. And superficially, this is true. Even in the Soviet Union, all that happens when you try to preclude resistance entirely, it just gets driven underground. In Nazi Germany, you had plenty of factional splits.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as this totalizing system, but I don't think that really is the point. I think the point is, to what extent is there like a plural space for the contestation of power, which is what liberal democracy is premised on. It's premised on that of power sharing. And you can't really say that every liberal democracy is a total bourgeois democracy and that there isn't spaces for contestation.
Mm-hmm.
Like a good example is, France, Portugal, Spain have had the election of socialist parties. Now, those socialist parties basically govern just like social democracies over a capitalist state. That's a policy question, and that's an economic question. That's a question of what did they choose to do. But the point is you still have this actual party competition that exists. It's a genuine liberal democracy. It's not a true democracy. I'm not really interested in what is a true democracy, because true democracies, you have to go back much longer in history, of course, to really look at. That's actually a big part of my book too, is a history of democracy and the way it's been theorized from Greece to the Renaissance, from Greece to Rome to the Renaissance to the liberal revolutions.
Mm-hmm.
But this is actually an interesting point here, is why did the liberal revolutions occur? A large part of it was due to absolute monarchies. Before that, monarchies were very decentralized. You had this system of feudalism where class was very complicated. It was all these intermediaries, all these little villages, fiefdoms. With absolute monarchies and the more overt centralization of power, it became very easy for people to mobilize against a common enemy. It was very easy where the power was, where you could revolt.
Mm-hmm.
And tyranny was, exercised by a body who you knew was your enemy, or you knew was infringing on your livelihood. So you have a centralized monarchy, which is kind of like why that develops is its own, for its own reasons. There's a lot of complex factors behind that. But to fast forward, that is what aggravates a lot of the liberal revolutions. Now, I think there's a strong reason why socialist revolution never occurred in a country with an established liberal democracy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually almost a more important factor than whether the country is poor. A lot of the times, Marxists like to say, well, the reason why Marxist countries don't have revolutions is the reason why liberal democracies don't have revolutions is because they're rich. And I think that's a part of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a part of it, undoubtedly. But a lot of it is legitimacy as well, because you don't really have, it doesn't work the same with a system where authority is not deemed as legitimate. It doesn't have a means of legitimizing itself. When there's a collapse, there's a greater impetus to get the population to overthrow it. Whereas in a democracy, even if the situation is bad, it's not legitimized by its performance or its claim to divine right or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's legitimized by popular sovereignty. You voted for this shit.
Yeah.
So you can either vote for another shit or something else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, deal with it. You you have that. And I think that legitimacy has been dwindling a little bit in the United States with the apathy towards the two-party system, but a lot of people think the alternative is just to protest. Now, I think protests can certainly be very effective. Is one, pressure campaigns like Palestine. It can actually get the system to adopt changes to ameliorate things.
Well, let me stop
Spread awareness.
Let me stop you right there. So
Please give be a Stalinist and like tell me when to stop talking because it's like complex questions.
No. Be a Stalinist. I'm wag my finger at you. As much as I want to believe that there's frustration within the two-party system, kind of back to that idea of a hyper-normalizing attitude towards this is just normal and this is how we live. You can feel that way online, but the real world tells you something quite different, right? If you get in the Wayback Machine and go to 2008 and think about the rise of Barack Obama, here is this moment where we're going to have the first Black president, and pretty empty, right, in the way he speaks in the vague terms of hope and change. And his vice presidential candidate is the same man that said something along the lines of, he's the only articulate Black person I've seen run for president, which is, there's been multiple Black people to run for president. Shirley Chisholm is one. And of course, Jesse Jackson is another. I think both of those people are rather articulate, but also Joe Biden is the author of the 1994 crime bill. So here we're starting to say the word mass incarceration more in 2008, as we're really starting to see the failure of 1994. And you're going to bring in the architect of this tough on crime bill as your vice president. Now, people can talk about strategy all they want, but on its face, this doesn't look like hope and change. Again, fast forward to 2020, everyone is literally protesting in the streets, at sometimes violently, right? To ask to demand to defund police, abolish police, end the carceral state, right? And you get, for president, who's going to fix this for you, is again the author of the 94 crime bill that builds more prisons, and a woman who ran on this idea of being a top cop while she was a district attorney and attorney general. So are we sick of a two-party system? Because again, here we are in 2024, and Kamala Harris, upon her announcement, has broke records raising money. So do we really care about issues, or do we really just care about posturing? Do we really just care about popularity contests?
If that last part was a question or a rhetorical question, I'm not sure.
Little both.
I agree.
Little both.
Like,
yeah, I need a smart person like you to expand on that.
Well, I mean, I have another video on the two-party system. It's called the two-party simulation.
Yes.
Which I'm very proud of, because I think that is a take on Trump that was lacking among a lot of people on the left. A lot of people have thought the things that I've articulated in those videos. I just think more like you just need more people to articulate them, right? A lot of people have the same ideas. It's another thing to try to theorize them, and I think the only purpose of theory, really, to me, is just to give a vocabulary to kind of explain ideas and put them together and see how they connect. But with protesting, you kind of mentioned a lot of things there. I'm not really sure where you want to go, if you want me to go back to kind of explain.
Yeah. You can go back to because another issue that I think we both have with protest is asking the question of, is this a very futile exercise? Because when we've seen with the Gazan protests, they've been pretty massive, right? Even places like Columbia University. I mean, this is these are the universities that produce PMC people that are either going to, and you talked about this a little bit in the video essay too, similar to where you went to school, it sounds like, where you're either you're going to work for the state in some high capacity, or you're going to work for like a consulting firm like Deloitte and Touche or something like that. Also, again, maybe working for the state, or maybe just maybe you're a bleeding heart and you'll work in some capacity for the nonprofit industry. So when you have kids going to this school, seeing the humanity of Palestinians, which in my lifetime, my going to be 47 years in a few weeks on this planet, I've never seen this before. So many people understanding the humanity of Palestinians, generally through, I don't know if you feel this way, social media allowing so many images to come through of babies. I hate to say this on it, like dead. The slaughter of innocence is really helping people have some sort of compassion for the first time. And we're seeing protests. Granted, a lot of these protests are in major metropolitan areas. The university protests in the center of the country, if they had them at all, were extremely small and paled in comparison to what people saw in the major cities. And I say that to kind of bring to light that a lot of the things that we talk about are like coastal problems or coastal issues, and not things that people in a large part of the country even talk about or discuss. And where you're from is also similar as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't want to kill people's hope with this video, which is what really sucks, is that I wrote it before. I wrote what was the tentative theory of contained opposition before October 7th happened, before people started caring about Palestine again. And this has always been an issue that I've known about for a long time, because I'm half Lebanese. My dad fled Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War, which is a different matter, but Lebanon has had its own experience being invaded by Israel. So I've known about like this issue for quite a while. I'm glad to see people talk about it. So I really didn't want to discourage people from protesting by putting out this video. And I kind of try to say that like protest with a clear demand can have an effect. I just don't think that effect is like disrupting the system, but not every protest is like overturning the system. Sometimes it can just be to raise awareness.
Do you think where you're from, I'm sure they were protesting in Toronto as well?
Oh yeah, lots. Huge ones at UFT.
Do you see, how can I put this? Lebanon is an interesting case because that's a moment where Reagan picks up a phone and says, cut it out. And they stop. And there's no cutting it out right now. And people.
What do you mean he picks up the phone and says cut it out?
You know, they makes a phone call to who was it? Was it Menachem Begin that was in charge at the time of Israel?
Of Israel?
Lebanon? The U.S. was still funding that.
Because Israel was kicked out of Lebanon because of Hezbollah.
Yeah, but still, the U.S. was still a part of the funding of the campaign. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. In
large
part, yeah.
Yes. It feels like these protests are doing literally nothing because nothing's stopping. Is it that? And this is the big issue that we've been asking ourselves. Ben Burgess lives next door to me, and we were all hanging out at a friend's house last night, and we asked ourselves, we don't have an answer, and maybe you've thought about this as well. It almost feels like either do you think the U.S. can't stop what's going on in Israel? They don't have the ability to?
I think Israel is a rogue state, but the U.S. could easily withhold ammunition if it wanted to. Like the UK, actually, it kind of surprised me that the UK did that.
Yeah.
Which I don't think would have happened under the Conservative Party. I mean, this is another difference between the U.S. and Britain is, Britain doesn't have a socialist party in the attempt to build the Labour Party into a socialist party. under Corbyn failed, but you still have like a party that is supposed to represent labor as opposed to big capital. That does not exist in the US, as you know. And so when we talk about electoralism and democracy in the US, it is a fundamentally different situation than most, I would say, most established liberal democracies, in the sense that a big reason why it's so hard to actually change anything, and a big reason why the protests we see tend to have very little effect, is because they will only have an effect insofar as there's a political party capable of achieving state power to a certain extent, or at least sharing state power, or the parties that exist need to acquiesce to that demand in order to get votes, and the Democrats do not feel the need they don't feel compelled to end the genocide in order to win votes. One, because they are pretty confident that they can keep getting votes because progressives will think that Trump is worse. And I mean, that's true. Trump, the basic difference between the Democrats and Republicans at this point is Trump is like, okay, just just kill all of them. It's okay. We won't penalize you. The Democrats are like, don't kill all of them. Like, can you stop? Gaza is already dead. Stop beating it, you know? So that's pretty bad, but there is a difference. And that's the really shitty thing, is there's very little ability. The system doesn't operate on what it's supposed to operate on. Like, liberal democracy is never about representing the will of the people. So Marxists often critique it on this basis. Liberal democracy has always justified itself as representing the interests of society, as sharing power. That's what distinguishes it from supposed authoritarian regimes, right? Is that it shares power with different people. And I mean, the US shares power between two different factions of capital, and that's not even an exaggeration. Like, that's literally what it is. You have two parties that aren't at all really obligated to acquiesce to the demands of their citizens, only to a very limited extent. Like, because they don't, the place that unions play in the Democratic Party, for example, is not as vital as unions in the NDP in Canada or the Labour Party in Britain, right? Unions are merely just a small faction relative to other interests within the Democratic Party, big capital, especially tech being one of them, right? The Democrats, I think, under Clinton got even more money than Trump did, which is and under Obama, they also got more money than McCain did. This is not always the case. But this is stuff we know already, so I don't really know if we want to go too much on the two-party system, because this is like, most people will probably already be like, duh. I guess it pertains to your question about Palestine, because the toleration of protests is fine insofar as it's not going to amount to anything. You know, that's, if anything, toleration of protests is good for a regime. It's not an exception. That's not to deter people from protesting as such. It's just to understand the objective function. And it's a dialectic. This is an important thing. It's a dialectical relation. So when you mentioned that book, We Will Burn, right? I'm well aware that allowing protests can backfire on a regime. So this is the sort of dialectic of hegemony that goes on, I talk about in the video. When you allow the freedom to dissent, most of the time they're counting on that freedom not being used by a political force that's going to disrupt the dominant logic or the prevailing consensus that rules, right? They're counting on that. It can theoretically be used by adversarial forces. So there's this delicate balance that a regime plays, that it has to play, between allowing a certain degree of civil liberties that add legitimacy and also allow adversarial forces to exhaust themselves. This is, I think, the most important point about what I talk about in that video, is allowing protests to exhaust themselves. And also not allowing it to reach a boiling point where it can actually tip the scale. Now, very sophisticated managed democracies usually have a very developed security apparatus that can allow that while allowing protests, they can use that security apparatus to kind of act outside of the law. Some people call this the deep state, right? Whatever term you use, this national security apparatus. Perfect example is the Black Panthers. that I talk about is the FBI, COINTELPRO. A lot of your audience will probably be aware. A lot of leftists, I think, are aware of these cases. But it's able to eliminate organized political actors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many. I think Black Panther Party also self-destructed on its own.
I mean, Black Panther Party at its peak only has 5,000 members. I think there's a lot of.
Yeah, I don't think it could have taken over.
It wasn't. People wanted to be way bigger and stronger. Like every black person in a leather jacket wasn't a Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That being said, I always
the state perceived it, right? The state perceived it as a
oh yeah. There were a lot of threats at that time, right? I mean, the weathermen were bombing buildings, and the ones that did it died in prison, or retired to academia.
Honestly, what I think was the biggest threat posed by the Black Panther Party was not so much itself taking power, but that it could have potentially, in the eyes of the FBI, given a model that people could have used for organization, because it did have a model that was pretty interesting, like with the breakfast programs, as well as the fact that it had a organized political program with chapters, and it made a lot of inroads for a U.S. context, which is a very anti-communist country, and especially within a sector of the population which has been pretty much kept out of the so-called democracy for most of its history. So,
yeah, I was like, why is this kid focusing so much on the Black Panthers? This Canadian, hell does he know about black people?
I brought up the Black Panthers because if COINTELPRO it's not just something that happens in every liberal democracy. I hate when Marxists talk about bourgeois democracy like a plural to generalize all of them. I mean, the U.S. is a radically different case. I put the U.S. on the this is Shelton Wallen's idea, right? It's an inverted totalitarian regime, and it's a type of intensified managed democracy that uses a lot of the techniques that classically authoritarian regimes use, which is lawless institutions. I mean, I don't want to go all Roger Stone here, but Kennedy is also a case. How often do you see in a liberal democracy the president gets whacked by members of the Secret Service? That's something I stay away from my book. I imply it by directing people to Peter Dale Scott. I think if you look at the literature on it by professors like Peter Dale Scott, it's, at the very least, they wanted him whacked. But without going too much into that, I think contained opposition is not something that is a CIA phenomenon orchestrated from the top down. Contained opposition is a effect of the system, and it's a containment strategy that is a structural tendency as opposed to a conscious containment strategy. Historically, in regimes, it was a conscious strategy. Give some examples. Bismarck, in response to the socialist movement of his day, Bismarck, ruler of Prussia, Bismarck decided to invent social security, be the first person to really implement modern social security. He implemented a welfare state of sorts, and he called it National Socialism, as socialism was getting big. This wasn't some democratic state; it was literally a like a monarchical system, and it was a containment strategy, a conscious one. Now, not all rulers have the prudence and the calculation of Bismarck. The problem with a system that depends on the actions of rulers is that they might also take a very different approach. One I stress in the videos a lot is in the Soviet Union, the way they dealt with the Prague Spring, the revolts of Hungary in 1956 and the Czechoslovakia of 1968, right? Was totally, it's not just bad from a moral point of view. People talk about from a moral point of view, but it was catastrophic strategically. And it always baffled me when you see Marxist-Leninists say, well, they had to do it because they were revisionist or parts of them were reactionary or whatever. My point is from a just even objective standpoint of governance, what the Foucauldians might call governmentality, it is a very ineffective strategy. So what I'm trying to really say here is when you have a system where these containment strategies are dependent on the actors, they can work depending essentially on whether the actors, and what I mean by the actors, like the party in power, the ruler, monarch, whatever, Khrushchev, Stalin, etc., they might deal with it intelligently or not. The strength of liberal democracies is they institutionalize the right to dissent. Now, that is a beautiful thing, but also let's ask a question. John Locke, one of the founders of liberalism as we know it, although he didn't actually use the word liberalism back then, but you know, when you study it, anyone who studies history of liberalism, he's usually in the canon. He believed in what he called the right to revolution. Every regime should be able to have its people revolt against a tyrannical government. Jefferson said the same thing and actually penned it in the Declaration of Independence, in the Articles of Confederation, which got conveniently thrown out when the Constitution by Madison was made. But that's also the kind of when managed democracy is established, something I talk about in the inverted totalitarianism video. Now, do you think Jefferson or Locke, when they talked about the right to revolution, you think they were talking about people who didn't own property? Of course not. And I mean, might seem obvious, but it's not obvious to a lot of historians. I mean, even like,
would you say it's not obvious to historians? It's not obvious to most people.
Not obvious to a lot of historians. No, it's surprisingly not obvious to a lot of historians. Like, it's obvious to someone like Charles Beard, who is the guy who has the economic interpretation of the Constitution. But I mean, just from a practical standpoint, you'd think that these guys who are really representing an ascendant coalition of big business owners, small business owners, and planter class, they're not, when they talk about right to revolution, they're not talking about slaves, they're not talking about workers, they're not talking about people who are going to take away their property or stuff like that. That should be obvious. Now, you got that that should encourage us to question the foundations which what we call liberal democracy is built on. If it allows for a freedom of dissent, what is that freedom supposed to be for? And that freedom is not just there for anyone to dissent because it's correct. Is there for a couple of reasons. One, they saw it as a defense for property against the tyrannies they associated with absolute monarchy, the encroachment on property. But also, I think they genuinely believed in a plural society, but one that was on like their terms. And I say they, really the bourgeoisie, the bourgeois revolutions, which were greatly radical for their time. I mean, I have to stress, like, including the American Revolution. But it leads to a set of rights that we associate with this thing called democracy, which are there to, which are really not there to be used by the classes of the dominated classes of society. Now, to Marxists, they would say, obviously, duh, and dismiss that. And this is where I think Marxists go wrong. Marxists associate liberalism only as a set of ideals to legitimize a regime of property, a system of power, and that is capital, a system which you'd be surprised how many political scientists I've encountered, so many academics, so much liberals who work in media, status quo liberals, who they think, well, it's liberal democracy. It's just the freedom for people to express their opinions. And the reason certain ideas don't succeed, it's because they're just not.
They're not good.
Don't want them. They can't imagine that it's also a regime of power, which it obviously is. And this is what Marxism has always tried to point out. Now, what I don't like what Marxists do is when they dismiss liberalism entirely to say it's associated with the regime of property, therefore it's bullshit. Therefore, China is no less democratic than America, or Soviet Union was no less democratic. And I think what they really get wrong is that liberalism is an effective containment strategy that they should also take note of. That's kind of something that I try to make a little subtle in the video, because I'm not trying to say like, here is the blueprint to control people. But realistically, every state that governs needs to govern intelligently, and you're going to have opposition regardless. Any regime, even as a socialist one, whatever. It's not going to be utopia. And how are you going to deal with these dissenters? People who are on the right or even different factions of the left? And it might seem like I'm jumping the gun here because it's talking about a scenario in which a socialist state is ruling. But I think it's important to question because, one, how do we know that like radical leftist Marxists aren't just going to repeat Stalinism again? Adorno, was worried the students were going to act like Stalinists who were revolting in the 60s, famously, right? He's kind of I think a grumpy fuddy-duddy, but he had a point. Like, a lot of leftists think that if they're the right person in charge, they won't govern like in an authoritarian way.
I
But
mean, that doesn't. I wouldn't say that's just the left. I think that's most people.
sure, most people. And that's what I think the wisdom of liberalism is. No man should have all that power. But also, the proles don't get power at all.
No.
But for liberalism, it's wise in this respect. No one should have too much power. And I think that's true of socialist regimes. And I think that's a better thing that socialists should take note of, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the state by just going full anarchist mode.
Mhm.
A lot of people who see the problems of actually existing socialism, they see the alternative as some sort of like anarchism. And I think anarchism is a really a good, effective contained opposition. We can get into that, and I know you have a lot of experience with that. You talk about teenage anarchists.
I don't know if I have the best experience with it.
I don't think most people have the best experience with it, and that's kind of the point I make in the video. But yeah.
Well, look, I want to shift gears a little bit. Can you discuss the role of mainstream media in shaping the narrative around protests and opposition movements? How does this affect public perception and participation, in your opinion?
Honestly, I think media control is super overrated. Like, Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent, which is one of the first books I read, like
Mhm.
on how the system works, man. You
Mhm.
know, that was one of the first books I read, and I thought it was like it made a lot of sense back then. It made a lot of sense too when Bernie Sanders was running in 2016, which is around the time I sort of became a Marxist of sorts.
Sure.
Um, partially in response to that kind of failing in 2016. But I think the degree of media control is a little overstated in how people are controlled, because if you look at opposition today, both on the right and left, especially on the right,
Mhm.
a lot of them are totally antagonistic to the media. I think the media still really appeals to a small subset of people. I
I
think
would
a lot of
disagree with
people
that.
don't believe the media, to be honest.
I
Like,
would disagree with that wholeheartedly, mainly because there's your own media,
okay, I guess we're talking about, I thought you meant
right? You have your own media.
mainstream media. I thought you meant only mainstream media.
Well,
Like,
I mean, there's your own mainstream media for the right, right?
yeah, so I thought you meant like Fox News and
Fox News and
MSNBC.
CNN are two different factions, right, of
Sure.
capital of mainstream media. If I like right-wing ideologies, if I color myself a conservative, I'm probably watching Fox News. If I think of myself as a more liberal person, I'm probably watching MSNBC or CNN, right? These are just two shades for whatever you want. And if I really think I'm rogue and I'm not a part of the sheeple, then maybe I watch a podcast or two or follow some people. I mean, right-wing radio is still a thing, bigger than most people think. I think this is just my opinion. I think a lot of people that live in the space that you and I live in are so online that they don't listen to radio. They don't think it exists. That's an old thing
I
that
remember
doesn't
it
exist.
exists whenever I go to my grandma's house. We're all watching CNN and MSNBC. I'm like, oh wow, people watch this.
Yeah, millions.
A lot
Right?
of people do, but I still think what I mean, it's a little overrated in the sense that I think the reason why protests aren't popular is not just because of the media depicting them badly.
Mhm.
I think a part of that, so maybe they return on controlled opposition a little bit. A big point that I allude to, that I go in a lot more depth in the book, is this point of exhaustion. There's a sort of theoretical foundation for that, actually, that was developed in conversations with one of my mentors, Assad Haider, who wrote the book Mistaken Identity at Verso Books. Some of you might have heard of him. He was introducing us to this thinker, Alain Badiou, who has this process of political movements, events, what he calls them, and events reach their point of exhaustion. And I thought of, well, like, would it be convenient to have a system where you kind of allow people to get this out of their system, to allow protests to exhaust themselves. So, and another thing that was shaped by this is also, I don't think it was shaped by it. It reinforced by my conviction. It was going to Mexico and talking a lot to Mexican leftists and the way they strategize.
Oh, what part of Mexico were you in? Mexico City?
So I told you actually it was in Monterrey.
Oh, you're in Monterrey.
Yeah. No, I wasn't.
The fancy city.
Well, parts of it are, yeah. Like there's parts of it are and parts of it aren't. But
Yes.
I visited both those areas. But what's interesting is that a lot of leftists there have no illusions about openly identifying as communists. Even the ones who are, they say, well, we can't because we could die.
Yeah.
It's a real threat.
Yeah.
But what's also fascinating to me is that Mexico has had its Bernie Sanders for a while, and that's like imperfect, but they had the Morena party, which has governed and now won another majority under the new
First
president.
female president.
Yeah, who's the successor, of course, to AMLO.
Yeah.
I think he's like the Mexican Bernie Sanders. Now, don't take it from me, but like most of the Mexican Marxist-Leninists I talked to, and what they said that other Marxist-Leninists believe is that most radical leftists tactically support AMLO. Like they think the best thing to do is to work within the Morena party, and a lot of that party are former radical leftists. Like
they have several parties within. It's a coalition party of also communist parties in the country as well. For those that don't know.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting that there's like this history of repression in Mexico. Of course, the students in the 60s were like massacred by the PRI.
Yes.
And you have also, but like the left has made way more inroads institutionally. You can call it, it's not radical enough, whatever, but like the center left, an existing left, has made way more inroads in Mexico than it has in the United States. Now, I don't want to reduce that to just a few factors. There's a complex array as to why no socialism in America. It's a very old question. But I think something that is interesting to me about not just America, but liberal democracies that allow people to protest, like Canada, like Britain, is that when you make it very easy for people to express themselves politically, and of course there's a limitation to this, that it is obvious, like there's a limitation. There's obviously you're going to face the boot of law and order at a certain point, but no one is arrested for just their opinions. No one is censored solely, at least by the government, for having a radical opinion. You can be a communist without fearing for your life in liberal democracies. Now, I think this is a good thing, but it also dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for people who want to be activists and involve themselves politically.
Mm-hmm.
It lowers the barrier to entry in the sense that in authoritarian regimes or countries that rely more on hard power and dealing with activists, it really weeds out 99% of the people who join radical movements just as a goth phase. I think that's a real thing,
As a younger person that's coming of political age, so in 2016, you're about 20, 21?
I'm 27, I told you.
Wait, how old? So how many years ago was that, dude? I'm too tired and old to do math right now.
How many years ago is what?
2016 is 8 years ago.
2016, I was like in second year university.
Yeah, so you were like what? 20?
20?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, see? I
thought you were saying I'm 20 now. I was like,
no, look, man. Look, I'm not crap. You are the same age as my oldest child.
That's crazy.
No, it's not. It's just life. Don't make me walk to Canada and shake the shit out of you. See, now you made me lose my train of thought, you dirty bastards. No, you're coming of political age in 2016, and I do think it's funny you say goth phase. 8 years later. I never
had one, though. I was always very disenchanted. Like I was, quote unquote, pilled very early on, so I never really was like that disappointed. Like I went to protest and I always felt stupid.
Why?
Like this is the thing, even when I was sympathetic to the cause, especially Palestine.
What protest? Like you live in a different country, so what was were you part of protests? Was there any protests going on for like the residential schools? I know that was an issue maybe 2 years ago.
Yes, I wasn't at that one, but there was the big ones with the indigenous in Vancouver. That wasn't where I was living, but Those ones are actually very important, I think.
You mean like 2019 or 2018 or so?
Yeah, that was the oil pipeline protests.
Oh, okay. Okay, those. Did you go all the way west for those?
No, I didn't go to those.
Okay.
But so yeah, like I'm talking the protest for me where I felt the most stupid probably ever was the climate protests in which Greta Thunberg attended.
Why'd you feel stupid?
Like half the people were there taking Instagram pictures, taking selfies with like Mother Earth protests, and then what was fascinating to me is there was all these people, and then Trudeau, our prime minister, he just walks into the protest and high fives people.
Isn't that why you guys love him?
But like people don't like him. That's the thing. Like he's had a minority government for most of his time. The votes don't show that he's popular.
He posed the greatest answer I've ever heard someone say when the question being asked, is there any more pictures of you in brown face? I don't know, man. I was like, Jesus Christ, he's still in office.
He's a parody of a progressive, like he really is. But he goes and he's not afraid at all of the protesters, like at all. And he just goes on. Then he goes and talks to Greta Thunberg like the next day on a televised interview. And she like goes and lectures him and wags her finger. And then he goes and says, yeah, I believe you. I understand your cause. Then he goes and he just continues the oil pipelines. And then there's the protests in Vancouver that happened like a year after or so. And those are like shut down by the RCMP. They bring sniper rifles to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty serious.
It's brutal. Those were brutal protests.
Yeah, they didn't want they weren't fucking around because they straight up were denying capital mobility to a certain extent because the protests were really overbuilding pipelines, and when you interfere with capital that seriously, they bring out the state brings out the big guns every time. It really does. Like it's gonna, like I said, it tolerates protests that don't really threaten the immediate interests of capital mobility. A good example of that too on the right wing end. People don't like to grant the successes of the right when they protest. And I was reluctant to at first, like the trucker convoy, because a lot of it was run by cranks. But the trucker convoy posed a threat. It did. I mean, and because it blockaded trade between the U.S. and Canadian border. And the response of the Canadian government was to freeze the bank accounts of people and literally infringe on a literal civil liberty, a privacy, a right to privacy, which is a pretty big deal. Americans will talk about that. Oh, it's so crazy, but America has the Patriot Act, which is, I mean, y'all are like China, and you don't even know it. Like America is a surveillance state more than any other liberal democracy, in my opinion.
Have you ever been to the UK?
UK in terms of cameras, yeah, it has the most cameras per capita. But as far as I know, I haven't seen evidence that this national security apparatus is able to spy on people.
I literally was recording in the same studio that who was in there? Portishead years before. I was in that studio in Bath, and a cop walked in and asked to see the camera because there was a stabbing at the club that was across the street from it the night before. I had never seen anything. I was like, there's cameras everywhere? Just cops came to me, I need to see the camera footage. They're everywhere. There's shows in the UK about people getting busted, like hopping turnstiles and fighting from all the cameras.
Every liberal democracy has gotten progressively more authoritarian. Like that's.
Oh, I agree. But why do people feel so accepting of the surveillance state though?
I don't know. I think people aren't really, but they don't have any means of dealing with it because both parties support.
Oh, damn. Surveillance state said, you better quit talking. Jesus.
The eye censoring me, man. Man. Out to get me, man.
That's messed up. I thought you guys had pretty good Wi-Fi in Toronto.
Yo, we pay way too much for internet. We got like two companies that we only got two companies, and they collaborate. It's like a cartel.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah, so I guess what we were talking about.
We also don't say that word on this show.
Cartel.
I live in Mexico.
Oh, right. So the barrier to entry of protests is something I want to return to a little bit, because this is not to say like trying to find the best way to explain this. Okay, so there's this philosopher called Leo Strauss. He has this thesis called Persecution, the Art of Writing. It's very compelling. He's a right-wing guy. I don't like his politics, but he has this thesis that basically in the ages where there was more persecution towards opinion and philosophy, less tolerance of heretical ideas, it forced philosophers to write esoterically, to kind of write their more dissident opinions subtly between the lines, so to speak. And he thought that it's a double-edged compliment he gives to like Islamic and Judaic societies, which were less tolerant to philosophy compared to post-Reformation Christianity. And he says that it also made for better philosophers because they had to kind of really like write for a specific audience. He's an elitist in that way. Now, what does this have to do with what I'm talking about? When you make it harder for people to actually protest, it is really difficult. Like, most people, it takes an exceptional level of bravery and ingenuity to actually organize politically in more authoritarian states that don't have a freedom of expression. And at the very least, you have to be a little subtle with it. Now, to succeed politically, you actually just have to be subtle in general. I think that's true of liberal democracies, but most leftists don't encounter this really take this into account at all. Like, for example, if you're a Marxist, the dumbest way to persuade people about socialism or / communism is to go and tell them, hey, I'm a communist. Here's why the Soviet Union's great. You need to have optics. Now, this should be common sense, but when you live in an authoritarian state, you're forced to have optics. You have no choice. You have to do it. So this has an effect on protests too, because you have to organize more tactfully. You have to also weed out people who aren't really serious about it, and competence is forced on you. Now, it's not impossible for people to be competent in liberal democracy, but when it's so easy to organize, people sometimes take that for granted. They go to protest on a whim. They organize without much forethought as to what their demands even are, or organizing a party that can kind of channel this broader protest movement into something that could seize institutional power, electorally or otherwise, or at least build institution in civil society. That's a big part of it too. What I'm getting at is, in permissive liberal societies that allow for so much expression, it really does allow for a lot of people to just get in and out of protest movements. They can just get in and out. And when you allow a protest movement to exhaust itself, you don't have to bring out the big guns. And a lot of the times when they do bring out the big guns, like police, it's just to quell the fears of old boomers. Like, I don't think, for example, in the state had to go that aggressive against Black Lives Matter. Like Trump, he goes in front of the Bible, puts his hand up, and he brings in the guard. They didn't have to do that. What Nancy Pelosi and Biden did, which was take a knee for George Floyd, was way more effective. And then now progressives, not all progressives, but enough progressives were convinced that they had a government that was going to implement some of the demands of Black Lives Matter.
Why do you think it was just? But I this is where I would kind of push back on the youth. It's not about boomers, because you're talking about people that are really old. It's about people that own property.
Yeah,
people that own property are your age.
A bit flippant with my terms, but
Right.
what I mean by boomers, I just mean conservatives who are like, law and order, please.
Well, this is where I think this is really interesting. I'll take an actual case in point. We'll look at Los Angeles, for example.
LA, right?
So you have a lot of protests in Los Angeles, and people had to have the signs in their yard. In this house, trans women are women, Black Lives Matter. Right? You know the signs I'm talking about, right? That actually belonged to more of a millennial, older Gen Z crowd, of a gentrifying class, a gentrifying professional class that's moving into changing areas in the city. And while they're out protesting different things, be it BLM protests or maybe even encampment protests, when these same people had RVs parked on their street with people living in the RVs, they're calling the same institutions of power to remove these RVs from their street. So I don't think that it's necessarily older people that are conservative as much as it is the acceptance into the system, capitalism, especially as a property owner, because you don't want people tearing up your stuff. I'll go to the hood and tear up other people's stuff.
No, 100%. Like there was the property damage was a big reason why they brought out the police, like in the Black Lives Matter protests
And
anyway.
the VP candidate, Tim Walz, called the National Guard.
Yeah. Yeah, and Trump praised him for it. He was like, "Love the way he handled it. Such a great guy."
So it's I always look at that fear as more of a fear, and we're seeing it now in cities like California, or in states like California, in the major cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles. Even though the numbers are actually going down to pre-pandemic numbers of property theft and even car theft, you're still seeing tough on crime rhetoric. You're actually seeing now homeless sweeps on a more mass level because of the Supreme Court decision, and you're seeing a return to the tough on crime laws that we got rid of mainly because the prisons were so overcrowded that people were dying inside due to the overcrowding. And we're reverting back to that. And I wouldn't say that's
It's
all
like
because
gulags. They basically have gulags in
right. But I wouldn't say that's just because older people are calling for it. I've seen younger people call for it, right? It's just these are people that are more indoctrinated into a system where they feel that they have something to lose
right.
if it's torn up by someone. I mean, you're seeing insurance companies leave California and starting to charge astronomical amounts of money for homeowners insurance. So the last thing somebody wants is, a protest on their street or anywhere near it. I think that's more powerful than, anything the state even wants to do.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct in that. Like, I don't think that. I mean, it's just I would say it's a good elaboration on part of the point I was trying to make,
Mhm.
which is that the reason why the state, and this is local states, this is municipal states. The state, I mean, like state apparatuses, local, provincial, and federal. They respond to protests not necessarily because they quote unquote pose a political threat, but because parts of the population actually just want them to get rid of the protest. And that's an unpleasant kind of fact, right? It's but this can is my point is that this can overshadow that the state doesn't need to do that to deal with a lot of dissent. Like it could take a soft power approach, and it often does, and it usually does a bit of both. Usually
Mhm.
does a bit of both. But I think there's this misconception on the left, and funny enough, some people still commented this on my video. They were like, and that's why peaceful protests don't work. That's why you need violent protests. And to me, whether a protest is effective doesn't have that much to do with whether it's violent or peaceful. A violent protest can be contain opposition too. It's just, a little more reckless. But it's still within it's still with far from threatening the consensus or mobilizing into a political force that can be articulated into a set of political demands or a party that can get at the heights of power. And where power is, I think it's really state and civil society. But the state is the one we're more accustomed to thinking about usually, because at the end of the day, you kind of really have to make a dent in that for something to change. But the thing I'm emphasizing here is that for the system to become more progressively uh, authoritarian, or even for the system to continue to exercise hegemony, not collapse, to make it harder for people to change anything, it doesn't require the system to go in a overtly Orwellian direction. People always talk about how if Trump gets in power, you'll have fascism, and that the threat is fascism. We need to save democracy from fascism. So I'm really responding to those people And someone commented saying he's praising Nancy Pelosi. What the fuck? And it's, you missed the point. Like, I'm saying Nancy Pelosi as a person who is employing a containment strategy
Yes.
is effective. Like, that is effective because now people might vote Democrat instead of being like, maybe we should do something else. So
I found that whole thing fascinating. That and I recently wrote about it. That it felt like when everybody was demanding justice and social change, the Democratic Party said we have social change at home, and then they put on the kente cloth and kneeled, and that was what you were going to get. Which, I mean, would you say your government is similar in that regard too? There's a lot of lip service when it comes to acknowledging things. Like, we'd like to acknowledge that we effed over these First Nations people, and we're so sorry for effing them over. And here's a bench. First Nations, we effed them over bench. There you go.
he's the king of it. I mean, I guess we can talk about co-option because this word gets thrown around a lot. And I think people sometimes think about co-option like it must be a sort of plot devised by people in power consciously. Like, hey, this is how we're going to placate the protesters. We're going to placate the leftists by adopting leftist iconography. I mean, co-option really, I think, emerges in the business world, and it just comes after the business world to politics as a result of simple party competition and winning votes. But with corporations, I mean, it's really market-driven politics. Companies have to compete with each other. This is something that won't be like surprising. You already know this, but co-option is institutional. It's not just always a conscious decision. Companies do it much better, in fact, than politicians do, I think.
Agreed.
Companies know branding. I mean, they're all about the target market demographic research, and they want to stand out to their competitors, and they also don't want to alienate potential consumers. So that's why they adopt this. There's a profit imperative to do so. So, like, economic liberalism in itself by already is that force of control by allowing a market that can respond to the demands of people socially and politically, not just economically in terms of raw consumerism, but there's sociological state. It adapts to them because you have a market system. China really figured this out. Like, what's really interesting is China has become a much more sophisticated control society since it marketized liberalized economically. It didn't want to democratize, quote unquote, politically because it didn't want the Gorbachev outcome where you actually have people contending for political power who can overthrow you. What Gorbachev forgot about liberal democracy is that liberal democracy isn't supposed to actually allow its competitors who are against the consensus to achieve power. Gorbachev wasn't supposed to actually allow people who are anti-communists to come to power, and he did because he actually believed in liberal democracy on face value. He totally underestimated that liberal democracy needs to be managed, and it is whenever it is stable. When you fail to manage liberal democracy, you get wild cards. You can get a communist come to power. You could even get a fascist. Managed democracy, to some extent, I want to specify, is actually good to some extent.
Mhm.
Maybe if Weimar Germany was better managed, you wouldn't have got Hitler come to power,
Mhm.
who people knew about for a while, but nonetheless, they couldn't really prevent his ascendancy. Really good Netflix documentary on that, actually, that just came out. But to return to the point about co-option.
Mhm.
So with China, they realize that markets are very effective because markets give people information. Markets are a
Hmm.
source of information on the population that can be studied. And when you can study the population, you can much better adapt your rhetoric to appeal to those demands. And you might also even adopt policies that people in the political elite echo chamber are just simply not considering, that might actually be good for the furthering of the regime's stability. So that's also why it's very effective to allow for a certain degree of liberalization, but not too much, right? I'm talking really neutrally in terms of like how to manage a society which applies to socialists just as much, because a lot of the socialist countries were shitty at this, terrible. When you have a system that forces obedience on via force, whereas you get imprisoned for political opinions, East Germany is the experience I know the most about, just because like I've my mother had friends who lived in the east side of Berlin when she lived in Berlin, and when the Berlin Wall fell, she met a lot of people who lived in that and experienced it, but also just from history, like we do know this was a thing, that how they shut down dissent, and it wasn't just reactionaries. It was very difficult to know who is actually a loyalist and who is just a person who wanted to reform the system or criticize it gently. You didn't really know, because everyone claimed to pledge allegiance to the regime. When everyone claims to uphold the ideology, to obey it, you don't know what your population even believes. So with liberalism, the genius of it is you allow for a certain degree of transparency where the population can be studied. When the population can be studied, the system can respond to the population without sharing power with it.
Look, we've been talking for almost an hour and a half, and I know it's late where you are, and I want to thank you again for just taking the time to talk with me. Before we go, I do want to ask you the hard question. I know you don't have a solution. This wasn't about solutions. But what do you see happening? Here we are in an election year here in the US. Pretty big election. It looks like the pendulum has swung mightily in the Democratic Party's direction with the election of Kamala Harris as the nominee. We still are seeing some protests here and there's some interesting games Harris seems to be playing. So she wasn't there for Netanyahu's speech, but she's made a statement about her support for Israel. And I guess she did meet with Netanyahu privately after his speech. There was a protest while he was there in DC. I don't know the numbers of how many people were there. I saw some images. It looked like there was lots of people there. Do you think this protest movement dies a bit before the election for fear of the fascist winning? Do you think it keeps going? Do you think people get burnt out? I mean, that is a very important thing that happens with things like this, because, as you say, power can wait you out, especially if you have no plan for the long game. But this is the problem of immediacy with what's going on in Gaza. What do you see moving forward? What would you like to see moving forward? Do you feel some sort of hope from what you're seeing with a lot of these protests?
I want to try to answer this by looking at another historical, different example that might not initially seem related, but
Sure.
I think it's interesting. So how did Charles de Gaulle deal with May 68? Leftists like to say May 68 was like the closest thing we've had to a revolution in Western liberal democracies since it's really in the 20th century. It's often exaggerated how much, but nonetheless, it was far bigger than anything we really saw in the United States or Britain, or especially not Canada. Canada sees less really political movements than America does, in my opinion, like insurgent movements. But how did de Gaulle deal with it? De Gaulle, a conservative? Well, everyone knows he compromised with the unions and the Communist Party, who really controlled the unions. Workers didn't have a lot of say in this, but he really compromised with the communists, gave them let them have power in academia, while giving wage increases to the workers. He accepted that. And how did he do? So he got them on their side. And what did he do with the rest of the students who were still not satisfied? He just let them go on. And then what happened? School started. Or sorry, not school started. It was summer started.
Yeah.
And they went home. Like, playtime was over. Like, sometimes the best way to deal with a protest is to acquiesce to a little bit of it and just let it fizzle out. And I worry that this would be really easy to do with Palestine. I think it's harder because you just have so much imagery, more than you ever did before, of dead babies. And now the international community is pretty much like a lot of the international community is in an agreement in that Israel is going too far. So I think
the international courts.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have the ICC, and you have. I mean, like I was surprised the UK even is suspending arms to Israel, because they're like the most ardent supporter of Israel typically, aside from the United States. So what do I think? Are you asking like what is going to happen with the protests?
I'm not asking you to have any sort of clairvoyance. I'm more asking your opinion on where you see things going. Your thoughts on that. I'm not asking you to totally predict the future, but I sadly am siding with you. And I don't say that because I'm siding with you. I'm saying that because I think we both are a little bit crestfallen by the reality that we think these things are going to peter out. I see it kind of petering out already because there's a fatigue. I also think because you're dealing with such a young, and I don't necessarily mean all just age, just young people getting kind of politically active in the post-Obama years. Trump was an igniter of political activity, for better or for worse, right?
Yeah.
Such a polarizing figure. That we still live in a society where I want what I want when I want it now because I want it. If I want a vacation, I can book it on my phone. I can get a meal on my phone. I can get somebody to fold my laundry for it and put it in my dresser drawers before I get home from my phone, right? I want what I want when I want it because I want it now. We feel that way politically as well. I think that's why sometimes we see these things peter out so quick. It's like, well, we did the thing. We understand the rule book says you have the sign, you do it peacefully, you shut down the freeway peacefully, and then you get the thing. Where's our thing that we want? So it feels like there's a lot of people that are frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, at what point does the imagery just become like something else? Like there was 2 self-immolations in the last 2 years. There was one at the very end of 2023, a young woman, and we had the young man that burned himself alive earlier this year. Using your historic context, that happened during the Vietnam War in like 64, 65, I think. And Vietnam officially ends in 74? But those protests didn't really end. Do you see the same thing happening here, or do you think things just peter out, especially if you get a Kamala Harris presidency?
It's a very difficult question. I mean, it's hard to predict. I like to hope. I know I say that hope is cope a lot of the time, but in that naive hope that leads you astray can be just as crippling as nihilism. That's what I end the video with. But it is genuinely hard to predict because this is an issue that is a kind of international issue, and it's also sorry, I just saw someone comment something about Drake. It's like
you can't.
Sorry, totally got
Oh, Jesus Christ! This poor guy's trying to have a very serious, heartfelt, and then you attacked his national hero.
Well, he's definitely a fan of like my videos because he knows I'm a hip hop head. Like he would only ask that question if he knows. Like I had FD Signifier on my show recently to talk about like Drake and Kendrick and stuff. It was funny.
You didn't have me on, but you had that guy on. Thanks.
We should talk about Drake and Kendrick.
Too late. You already had your black guy. You chose that motherfucker over me. I see what it's all about now. It's fucked up.
Man, if I have you on, it'll be for talk about teenage anarchism.
Nope, you should have had me on to talk about fucking Drake and Kendrick, but no, you wanted to have that dirty son of a bitch. I
didn't even know you cared about this. I remember we talked.
I've done multiple shows on it.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't follow those ones. I heard I remember last. Well, you definitely. I know you were aware of it, but I didn't know if you like cared that much.
Yeah. When this year ends, and you walk up to a random person and say, "Excuse me, what was the story of the year for 2024?" Drake Kendrick battle. No one's going to say the election.
Oh, it's way
No
more.
one's going to say the Olympics. They're going to say Drake and Kendrick, if they remember.
It was definitely more entertaining and less depressing than the election.
Yes.
I'm gonna go on a whim.
Were you Team Drake? Were you Team Drake? Were you sitting there?
No.
Why'd you look at me so serious?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with being Team Drake, but I think I came into it like I was surprised Drake responded. Because
Really?
I think I never saw them as like real competitors. Like to me, Kendrick is top 5, if not the GOAT. Like I think he's like LeBron James of rap.
Okay.
In terms of like, I think he's put out the best quality, like the best music.
Mhm.
What he just has left, I guess, is impact. Maybe like that's the only thing to be the GOAT. He needs impact. But in terms of quality of work, he is the GOAT. To me, Drake is more like 50 Cent. Like he's a really good hit maker. You know,
Okay.
he's a great hit maker, and he can rap well when he wants to, but he's just not in that league. So the fact that Drake even responded and did well, I think he did pretty well with Family Matters. Was pretty dope. It impressed me, but then he got slaughtered, which should have been expected because it's Kendrick fucking Lamar. We got a lot of good music from it. I was very happy with it.
I mean, we tried to cover all the things that I think happened during that moment, which are different than other battles, where you have kind of a quickness of music coming out. You didn't really need to go through distributors or record labels. YouTube can instantly put a song up. Even if you go through Spotify, maybe you don't know this. Even if you're one of those large artists and you go through Spotify, it's such a process to get your music up. It takes about a week. So that's why that stuff wasn't on Spotify right away. It was on YouTube right away because they can just post a song instantly to YouTube and have it up, which is what those two are doing, which I found kind of interesting. There was a lot. There's race issues to it that I found interesting because no one had Drake's been popular for almost like 20 years, at least 15 years. Drake's been popular, which is very rare for hip hop music to have someone be on top. I think that speaks to a certain time we're in right now, where we're living in a loop where it's hard for us to hear new things because you have to get out of your own bubble. And that's where we're very comfortable and where we live, which kind of goes into what we're talking about right now, which is the interesting thing about Israel Palestine is that people got out of their own bubble for long enough to change a paradigm in the way we see Palestinian life. That's fascinating. That's amazing. Again, first time I've ever seen this in my life. I grew up in Cold War America, watching all those propaganda films put out by Canon Pictures about kind of almost minstrel show movies about Palestinians as bumbling terrorists, right? This is how a lot of Americans grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing all that go by the wayside. People are going, but they're killing the babies. And that's too much. It's a bridge too far. They have to stop. You have Jewish citizens, Israeli citizens protesting in mass. It's too much. You killed the guy that you were negotiating with. It's too much.
Oh yeah, like I've seen way more positive coverage by independent media, at least, on this issue than I've ever seen. My dad likes to tell me a lot about like how bad the 2000s were as an Arab, because he was a tour guide and he used to take people to Yemen and Egypt a lot as a destination. And then when 9/11 happened, his client list
It's a tour guide or a drug mule?
dramatic. Come on, man.
I'm joking.
But yeah, big reason moved to Ottawa at the time to like get a government job, basically. Just stop doing being a tour guide, because like where he used to take people, there was just a less demand because no one wanted to go to the Arab countries anymore because of 9/11.
Yeah, 9/11 was a game changer. I mean, that was horrible for people that were of Muslim descent in the West.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess The international community, I've hoped for that to some extent. The United States, man, it's I think what will undermine Israel is Israel itself. The United
Mm,
States isn't going to do much. The thing that I see with Israel is that they really are going in the direction that by just throughout history cycles of like a declining civilization. I mean, they have decline of elites, like sorry, division between their elites.
mhm.
They have a civil war almost. You saw that footage when the people who were imprisoned for raping Palestinians
Yeah.
were later like you had a bunch of settlers protest to have those people freed. They don't even believe in their own rule of law. I mean, this is like close to Nazi Germany. So you have a huge division. You have the far right threatening to coup Netanyahu if he makes a peace deal. It's a pretty big deal.
Mhm.
So it's I think if what will happen in this conflict, Israel will undermine itself. But I really stay away from making predictions for this thing because like there's just things that can change everything. Like Iran and Israel could go to war.
Mhm.
One of them could get nuked.
Mhm.
Who knows? It's really hard to tell. It's very bleak, but I just see right now the conflict going in a different direction will be more due to Israel's, you know, itself collapsing due to its own actions rather than America necessarily suspending arms to it. That'd be great if it stopped arming it,
Mhm.
if it even sanctioned it like South Africa. That'd be
Mhm.
great.
Mhm.
I just don't see that. I don't see Kamala Harris doing that. I mean, she literally interrupted a protester yesterday talking about genocide, and she said, with that attitude, Trump's going to win.
Yikes. Well, hey, she's thirst trap Oprah. Nobody said she was a great orator.
Hmm.
Um, look,
What was
it's
your favorite diss track of the
oh,
beef?
you want to hear it? We could if
Yeah,
you have a minute, I'll tell you about
I
it.
do.
Um, so a little bit about me that you don't know. I before you were born, I think I have the vinyl here
Here you go
somewhere.
again.
I rapped and I recorded my first big single with the DJ of this new upstart group called the Black Eyed Peas in 1997. So you were born in 97, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so the year you were born. You're a year older than my daughter, sorry. Um, and so I've been pretty deep in the hip hop world as well. And then living in a recording rehearsal studio with all the big names of hip hop in the Bay Area. I know a lot of those people. So I follow it a little bit, but I don't really care as much because a lot of the younger stuff just isn't for me. Right. And I don't say that because I'm better than it. It's just not for me. I'm not 20 years old anymore. And I'm not supposed to give a damn about what a 20-year-old says. Right. There's people that I listened to 30 years ago that are still making what I think is good music. So maybe I'll listen to that, or I just listen to the same 5 records. So I wasn't really into the whole thing. I saw it peripherally, and then Toussaint made me sit down and listen to the second diss song. What was the second diss song that Kendrick had?
You
With the
say
letter
616 in LA.
was that is that the one that's a letter to his family? Which one's
Yeah,
the letter to his family?
616 in LA.
That was the most brutal rap song I've ever heard in my life.
Brutal.
That
Like,
song
are you sure you're not thinking of Meet the Grams?
is it that's the letter to his to the parents, right?
Yeah,
Meet the
Meet the
Grant.
Grams
Okay.
is the
So
one
yeah,
about.
she
Yeah.
she hit me up. She goes, "You got to hear this song. You got to hear this song. You got to hear this song." And we sat down together and we listened to it. And Tony, I'm not effing with you. I was like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I was like, this is the most vicious song I've ever heard. Like this is brutal. And I am a fan of battles. I love them. I used to do them when I was a kid, and I loved watching them. I've seen some great battles over the years in the Bay Area. Um, but this was just different because you have to remember these guys aren't seeing each other at a show and right, and someone got a camera of it. This is recorded songs. Back in the day, either you met at the radio station where you guys both live, and these guys are also bi-coast. They live on the opposite sides of the planet, right? For the most part of the continent. And you'd have to record a song, clear samples, book studio time, press it up, ask the big DJ to play it, and then maybe 2 months later you'd get a rebuttal. Maybe. So to get that song so quick, for Drake to come back so quick, for me, that my head was just spinning around. I was like, oh wow, this is so cool. If you're a fan of hip hop, this is the cool. Get your popcorn. This is what it's all about. And what pissed me off was Questlove, of all people, to say this is disrespectful to the genre. This is what the genre needs. I'm so sick of hearing songs about all the ass someone's gonna eat and what color your butthole is. I don't care. Get back to being dope. And for what it is, whether you like Drake or Kendrick, I don't care. Both of them just went for it. And it was really cool to witness. And then Kendrick did something that was just masterful. He goes to LA and he gets all the Negroes in LA, which is a dwindling population. Let's keep that in mind. And has this great big West Coast hip hop summit. And he brings 40 out and Dre out and just everybody from LA, and has this massive concert, which is the biggest middle finger to Drake. Because Drake, if he really was that dude, he could do it in Toronto. But he didn't. Because he can't. Because he is
beefing with all of them.
What'd you say?
He's beefing with everyone in Toronto, like with the Weekend. Like half of Family Matters was about the Weekend.
But also, how many MCs are coming out of Toronto?
Not many,
right? I mean, I'm sure if you and I went to the spot where the kids was doing shows at, we'd meet a bunch of MCs, and maybe we'd give a damn about a handful of them. But seriously, he's just not that cat with his ear to the street like that, because he's just not a street cat. He is
really good R&B here, though.
Toronto. One of my favorite singers is from your hood. Estero is from Toronto. And if I think about it harder, I know there's more people that I really dig from that area. There's a filmmaker that I was on his program once, Sam. I can't remember his name. He made a great anthropological study of heavy metal called Metal Evolution. And then his boy, who's also a Toronto rapper, did the same thing with hip hop. I think it's called Hip Hop Evolution. It's on Netflix. Check it out.
Oh, yeah,
it's actually really good.
Yeah.
And their studios are in Toronto. When you pull back, kind of like we do with politics, and I said that thing earlier about when you think about 2008, the first black president is aligning himself with the man that's the architect of the thing that locked up more black people than since slavery. When you pull back, you look at Drake and go, you were an actor first. And I've never seen an actor first dominate a genre and kind of bounce around with different personas. And it's always like he's been acting. And it kind of begs the question, does real matter? And that's how I was looking at hip hop for a second. Because I grew up in the era of you got to be real or someone's going to call you out. You can get hit. Some kids get shot. And Drake is this guy that just has managed to avoid that until Kendrick Lamar. There's other people that tried, but Kendrick really puts it to the test and does that hip hop summit, and it's just over for Drake. You're not real. You're not that dude. We just destroyed everything about you. with no violence. And that's when Questlove, that's what really pissed me off about that statement, because it's like, this is the essence of why we love hip hop. There's competition in it. And that competition comes out of a gang truce. We're no longer going to beat each other up on the streets. My graffiti writer is better than your graffiti writer. I'm going to get up higher than you. My break dancer is better than your break dancer. We can outdance you right now. Let the crowd decide. My DJ is better than your DJ. He got a bigger system. That's what I love about hip hop. And that's what you got in that battle. I'm going to show you I'm better than you. Look at me put the city on my back, the region on my back, flipping you off the whole way. Oh, how do you not love that?
Would you think of Drake's attempt to kind of tear down Kendrick's image as the quote unquote woke rapper? Because I thought that was an interesting angle.
Hilarious.
That could have worked, but totally failed. One, because it's coming from Drake.
Yeah.
And two, because I think he like walked into a lot of lines, like the colonizer line.
Oof.
He walked into that one. But I thought it was interesting because, like, I don't know. I looked into the Kendrick woman beating allegations, and it's not unbelievable.
Mhm.
Like, I think it's very plausible,
Mhm.
and it totally failed as an angle, though, right? Like, but it was an interesting thing, like that he was going for, because Kendrick kind of is like, I view
Always trying to
Kendrick
free the
as a great
slaves.
MC. He's a great MC, but people hold him up as like Tupac.
I don't dig that. A
Yeah,
lot of older cats do. Look, you want to crap on older cats? Go point to Kendrick Lamar, because there's a lot of older cats that love him. And I remember there's a friend of mine who was a pretty successful rapper where we're from in the Bay Area. And now he's a Hollywood script writer in LA. And I remember he worked at this record store that's pretty famous where we're from in a place called Berkeley, California, called Rasputin's. I remember I was hanging out with him in the record store one day, and he had done a song with Kendrick Lamar when Kendrick was like first coming out. And I think To Pimp a Butterfly had came out, and people were just like going just ate crap over To Pimp a Butterfly. And I saw it on an end cap at the record store, and I looked at my boy. I was like, "Is this record all that good? Like, is it everything someone's saying?" And my boy looks at me. He's like, "You heard Tribe Called Quest, right? Yeah. You heard De La Soul, right?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, you heard this already." So for me, Kendrick is a throwback to the 90s with a veneer of being hood adjacent. So as one person I had on the show, we were talking about music and capitalism. He brought out something interesting about people like Kendrick and Vince Staples. They're not gangsters. They're gangster adjacent. And they use their closeness to hood life to be their validity is real. And I find that interesting. And I think Kendrick
Vince
does it.
Staples is dope, though.
Huh?
I like Vince Staples. He's, I think, one of the really good, like, newer rappers.
I have my issues with him when he speaks. His music, I think, is pretty good, but whenever he tries to talk, I'm like, oh God, people need to stop acting like this kid's smart. But watch this be the one episode that he watches.
I think they like him because he's funny.
I think he's interesting. I think he's really interesting. I saw him play live in a festival. I didn't know who he was, and I was like, this kid is dope. I really dig what he's doing. And then I've just heard some interviews with him, and he's a little disingenuous with some of the things he says about the business, and I'm not going to get into it. But I think that line about always trying to free the slaves,
oh yeah,
was hilarious. But to your point, it falls very flat. And again, if you want to juxtapose it to anything, it really becomes Trump and Kamala Harris. Donald Trump can't really say anything to Kamala Harris because she has something that Joe Biden doesn't have, something that Hillary Clinton doesn't have, and that's this racial armor, where these insults that he loves throwing at people get perceived as racial attacks. And where he tried with Elizabeth Warren, I think where he wins there was nothing Elizabeth Warren was going to say or do where she was going to come out victorious. If she's 1/32nd Native American, she still has played up Native American ancestry to gain an unfair advantage. And when it comes out she's nothing.
Yo, that's so funny. You
Right?
know I'm more Native American than Elizabeth Warren is? I'm like 1/8 Pueblo.
You should have been
Hardly anything, and she's like 1/16th, and she called herself like she identified as a woman of color in her application. What was it, Harvard?
Yeah, and she took that job and became part of the PMC again that you talk about in that video that I think is very important. And again, back to the Drake Kendrick Lamar thing, the insults Drake threw at Kendrick, which seemed like they were going to be damning, especially when it came to the beating of the wife, it didn't hold water. Not because it didn't happen, but because Kendrick has positioned himself as such a man that if he did make that mistake, because we have to remember that I don't think the worst thing you've done is who you are forever. I just don't believe that. I worked with unhoused people. A lot of people don't get unhoused because they make great decisions. Some of my best friends have murdered people. I don't think the worst thing you've done is who you are forever. So for Kendrick to kind of embody that I'm a better person now, even trying to attack him makes you seem petty, tacky, and small because you're the guy that there's allegations of that you hit on younger women that are underage, calling this guy a wife beater. And he's the family man. So it's like, oof, and again, just juxtapose it. Maybe that's your next video essay. That'll be the one that gets you a gajillion views. And then you get on all the hip hop stuff and then you get invited to all the shows and stuff. I want it to happen for you. I want you to be the most successful MFer there is. I get nothing if you fail. I get nothing if you fail. I get to clap as you rise. So maybe that's the next thing you do. Juxtapose Drake and Kendrick's
You're
beef.
talking about me right now.
I'm talking about you.
Oh, FD Signify already made the great big Drake versus Kendrick video, 3 hours. There's nothing that I'm
You
gonna
can do it
say
in 20 minutes and you can make it more interesting. If you cover the racial aspect of it, use that juxtaposition I just gave you. You're a highly intelligent person. I think you have some people that you work with. You can put it together and make it super dope.
Well, this is what I originally wanted to do videos on. Like originally I was like, I want to make hip hop analysis videos. And I was like, who the fuck is going to care? What I have to say. Why would anyone care? Nobody should care what I have to say about hip hop. So, but it's fun. I don't know. I have a secret fantasy that one day in the future, like 5-10 years from now, I have a couple books out. I get invited on the Breakfast Club. I want to talk to Charlemagne.
Hey, again, I hope it happens for you. I hope it happens for you. I mean that the kid. Oh, there he goes. I mean that with all sincerity. I totally hope that happens for you. I make music kind of videos. We do music shows here. I wish they got more views because I'd much rather talk about was 1977 the greatest year of music of all time, or have a tear-jerking conversation about the horrors of what's going on in the Middle East and the futility of the two-party system, right? I'd much rather talk to you about Drake and Kendrick because it's just fun.
It is.
It's a fun conversation, and I think what we witnessed showed the world because I found these videos. It's so funny. So I watched your video again before we got ready for the show, and it was still somewhat early. And I started watching. You're going to really laugh at this. How goofy I am. I'm getting ready to do some more video essays because I signed this deal with Means TV. And there's a guy that has a great archive, and I was watching some videos in his archive, and he's got videos from 1989, 1992, and I think one from the 60s, and each one is about the problem with music in the Black community. Hip hop is ruining the Black community. 1991, hip hop is ruining the Black community. You know, who's the ass eat lady? What's her name? Sukiyuki. Eat niggas ass. Eat niggas ass. And then you got the other lady talking about how diseased her vagina is, that if you have intercourse with her, it will literally change the colors of your semen. Another woman did a song saying that she doesn't even bother taking Plan Bs after she lets a dude nut in her guts. She just pops Percocet. Says works same way. I don't think any of that embodies all of hip hop. It's just a part of it. It's just a part of music in general. There's always going to be something raunchy. I come from the world of rock as well. And you know what the song was that the PMRC was really mad at? It was Prince, and it was a group called Wasp with a song called Animal Fuck Like a Beast. And that was the hook, because I fuck like a beast. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I get it. This is just part, it's just part of the shock value of music. I need to get eyeballs on my stuff. I got to have a song called Fuck Like a Beast. I got to talk about all the buttholes I eat. I got to talk about how diseased my penis is. All these things will get eyeballs, and then maybe I can do the big arty project. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's just the nature. That doesn't bother me that much. When Kendrick and Drake battled, that was a substantive battle. There was the music production I thought was really good on it. I thought the subject matter was next level.
You know this YouTube channel called What's the Dirt?
Mm-mm.
He's like this white Canadian Toronto man,
Aren't they all?
who breaks down lyrics so well. Like everyone respects this dude just because of how detailed he is. Like think of me with my Cultural Revolution video. Imagine you apply that level of detail to like lyrics. It's incredible. Like he
some
just
of that stuff is too, but I'll watch some because Toussaint watches all that, and she sends some of it to me, and some of that stuff pisses me off. Some stuff pisses me off.
Think it's reach?
Sometimes I think it's a reach. But for the most part, there's a guy that I'm a huge fan of. He's been on the show several times, named Justin Hunt. He's a great hip hop journalist.
Company man. Company man. Yeah, I watch.
Yep, he's been on the show several times. And we did the Kendrick show with him. We've done a bunch of hip hop shows with him.
I gotta listen to that for sure.
And I don't know. I think hip hop's in a weird. I think music in general is in a really weird place, and a lot of that has to do with the way we consume music, and the way we consume music always changes the way it comes out. It's another reason why this battle was so interesting, because all the laws of music it gave a middle finger to, which is really cool. Like TikTok and Reels really dictate how music is being made and how people think about their song structure. When the radio format was changing, people got into the hook quicker. As the album became less of an artistic expression and more of something to sell, because remember, singles was just what it was. Then albums changed totally about, okay, we got to have the hit here and the singles got to be this track. Go back and listen to records in the 60s and 70s. It would take like 4 or 5 songs before you even got to the single. And sometimes those songs are extremely self-indulgent. A lot of that changes as production changes, as things like music video changes, as radio models change. So now you have this new model, if you will, which is 15-second snippets. So you have to have with
Spotify, it like counts the first 15 seconds as a stream. which encourages them to start the hook at the beginning.
That changes the way music's made if you're trying to make stuff for the 15-second bump. Because everybody wants big T-shirt Billie Eilish, right? Everybody wants that. That person made a couple bucks on TikTok videos. Billie Eilish brought that person on stage. No one knew who they were until the line, because no one's listening to the whole song. So
It's bleak.
So music is changing in a way that no one knows where it's going. Any prognosticator's full of poo. It's not over. It's not going to die tomorrow, but it is the background noise in our lives. And there's a reason why like ambient music is so popular. Vaporwave, chill wave, anything. Just background noise. And we can produce this background noise with artificial intelligence. That's kind of scary, right? So again, back to Kendrick and Drake, why this is so interesting is you had two people actually sitting there making music, dominating the landscape for a hot minute. That's important. That's huge.
People wanted to see the downfall of Drake.
They saw it.
I didn't hate Drake. That I'm kind of indifferent towards Drake.
You can't, just like I can't hate Too Short. You can't.
Territory. But like, I mean, Drake has good music. He does have some good music. It's just like few and far between. Like he just has so much music. For every album, he has about. He's a lot like Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne has so much bad music, but Lil Wayne can really rap. Lil Wayne is great when
he's gotten so much better. I remember Lil Wayne when he was a kid with the Cash Money, and I didn't like the Cash Money guys.
Do you know he like lost his virginity at like 13 in a threesome with Birdman?
That's weird and gross, and I don't mind knowing that.
Yeah, he was like a child star, so he was basically like he was pretty much molested. But he like bragged about it. He was like, "I lost my virginity at 12."
It's like, oof, that's not a good.
That's not a flex.
No. Sometimes when that kid talks, it's just like, oof, you tell some horror stories, young man. But he's a child star, and I don't think we look at a lot of musicians as child stars the same way we look at like the cast of Different Strokes or Shirley Temple. But you don't think of De La Soul as child stars, but they were like 18, 17 when they got their record deals.
I just thought of one thing, because I thought of the reason I'd never make a video on Drake versus Kendrick. I mean, some of the stuff you mentioned, the racial angle, FD talked about, but not that maybe that exact angle, like that you made that comparison with Kamala Harris and Trump. That is a interesting thing. But another thing with Drake, so people have always called him like a culture vulture, and while that's true, a lot of what Drake is also just an embodiment of Toronto, and that is a kind of postmodern culture. Like Toronto is really a hodgepodge of like white Canadian, Jamaican, West Indian culture, and Arabic words, Indian words. It's like really a hodgepodge of like Canadian and immigrant Canadian culture. So it's like, I think it's true that he doesn't, he's not from the hood, but like he does hang around a lot of people who just talk like Toronto people. And you've heard the Toronto accent.
I don't believe it's real because I was in Toronto in 2019.
It's like, it's not real in like downtown Toronto, but I mean, it's probably a performative thing, but like it is definitely a thing in like Scarborough and Mississauga, and definitely in Brampton, those like suburb areas.
That's where that chick is from, right? The one that does, "Oh no, fam, get your mom's out the hood." That is the fakest, forced. You know why I don't believe it's real? Because Drake would have been doing it in 2004. It's only been a phenomenon in the last few years.
Because he didn't live in Toronto for quite a while. Like he went to Houston. He lived it because his dad's from Houston, I believe, and he went there for a while, and then he got famous pretty young. Like he was like 20, 22. So he was like away from the city. He didn't really come back to the city till like after. Like I think the first Drake album where he sounds Toronto, where he sounds like Drake,
Mhm.
is Take Care. And the most Toronto album is actually Views. Views is that like Caribbean
I
sample.
didn't know he was related to Larry Graham. I didn't know that. And Larry
They
Graham,
sampled him in Kendrick's track in 616 and
and I had no idea that he was kin to that's his uncle, which is pretty cool. Larry Graham is the man that made Prince or turned Prince on to what is Prince, Seventh-day Adventist? What was he again? Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witness. And Larry Graham is the man that I believe invented slap bass. It's a bad MFer. Look up Larry Graham. Bad cat. Bad cat. And I had no idea Drake was kin to him. And it's like, oof. Nepotism's an MFer. I've never really bought into Drake. I just never got it because I'm such a old school punk kid that I'm like, that's the guy from TV. F him. You know what I mean?
I get the appeal of Drake. You know what his appeal is? First world problems. Like it's basically like he makes music for guys who get girls but simp sometimes or simp often.
There was a trend. How many years ago was that? Maybe 10 years ago. There was this thing. Drake's the type of N-word, or let's say Drake's the type of dude.
Yeah, I remember that was when he was really getting punked for like the crime memes. That was in Tumblr. That was on Tumblr.
The funniest thing, what was it? Drake's type of dude. What is it? Pull up to his homie house with a motorcycle and 2 helmets. It was like Drake's the type of dude that look at himself in the mirror when he put on chapstick.
Drake's the type of dude to fart after to flush a toilet after he farts.
They were I laughed so hard at those things. So hard at those things. So I never took that guy that seriously. And I was always kind of baffled. I was like, people really care about this dude? When you look at the numbers of who are the top concert draws, it's Drake and Taylor Swift. Like those, he tours more than her, but they bring in just ridiculous amounts of money. And also, if you look at the most streamed people, it's those two. But kind of back to what I was saying earlier about we're stuck in a loop. They've both been around for a long time as far as pop music goes, because usually that stuff has a cycle and the new thing comes out. Taylor Swift is about 30, right? 30 something. Drake is 30 something.
Drake's almost pushing 40. He's like Drake's like 30, 38, 36.
If Kanye's not a year older than me, then we're the same age. And these people are still, tastemakers, if you will, in music, even for extremely young people. Which is crazy to me, because I can't remember a time that this happened where someone stayed on top so long and just didn't even just implode. And especially again with hip hop music. Like,
I think I was like in 9th grade or something when Drake's first big hit was out, which is like.
You talking about the mixtape thing, or you mean when he actually had an album out?
His first big hit, which was Best I Ever Had, which was on So Far Gone.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that. I was
like, think
crazy.
about
He's been around for a while.
You're working on a master's, and the first time you heard this dude was when you were 14.
Yeah.
Sorry, grade 9.
I'm done my master's. I finished my master's a year ago.
Oh, so look at you. Time, it flies. Okay, I'm old. Just remember that. Just got to keep that in mind. You were my child's age.
Hey man, you know how old Karl Marx was when he wrote 1844 manuscripts?
How old was he?
25.
He should have stopped smoking cigarettes.
I feel like shit compared to that. He was writing that at 25? It's insane.
So is that what you put yourself up against? You're like Karl Marx in an era where people's life expectancy was half of what it is now. At 25, did all these things. Is that what you don't do that?
Why? Because
you'll burn out. You'll get really angry. And then you too will find yourself like Doug Lane yelling at young people.
Maybe.
No, I'm just kidding. Doug, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding.
I hope you do the video essay. I hope you do the video essay.
On what? On Doug Lane?
Don't do that. Don't start no
Why would I do
video
that?
essay. Jesus Christ. If you're gonna do video
I
essay,
know he watches my videos, and he messaged him once, and he never responded. I'm like, I know you watch my videos. We interview the same people.
Did you talk to him like Suge Knight in that Source Wars? I know you watching my videos.
No. It's like I found it weird.
Come to one dime.
I found it weird. He was like I know he knows who I am. Like we're and I know we probably wouldn't even disagree politically that much. Like we're in similar kind of fields. We'd probably disagree on a lot of things, but he's like, I guess you would call like left who's critical of the left type guy, you know?
It's a thing.
Yeah, but like people like to pigeonhole people like that in one category. Like they call it like post left or critical of left. I don't know. There's this
I think that's because we're in the era of branding.
Yeah, it's all branding.
And I got to brand you as this guy. That's Tony. He's the anti-Marxist Marxist. So that's what he is. He's a post-left guy, and he's with these theory underground people. So that's the crew he wrote. It's like, man, that's whack. That's so whack.
Someone was just like, you two can turn into Chris Catrone. You know, I'd prefer that than turning into Doug Lane, you know? Like, Chris Catrone is like, this guy really believes in his Marxism. You know, like a lot of people like to call him like a fascist or whatever. Like they say he's a right-wing reactionary communist. I'm like, Chris Castrone is just like, if anything, my big criticism is he's so like really believes in like old classical Marxism. Like you can go back to this classic Marxism. And I think that's kind of what's my thing with him, you know?
But look,
it's not the worst thing.
I'm going to need you to stop calling all these people's names out because I'm not trying to get Will Smithed if I do end up going to Chicago with Doug.
Oh, I had Catrone on my pod. Like I had a good conversation.
Yeah, but he may take it differently, and all of a sudden Chris Catrone tries to slap the shit out of me. Keep my name. Spencer Leonard tries to hit me.
How tall are you in real life?
I'm 5'10". I am 5'10", and Tucson can eat a dick. I'm 5'10".
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Me and Chris are about me and Chris about the same height because I hung out with Chris in New York.
Now you could throw hands with Chris Catrone.
I'm not trying to throw. Look, man, I'm a peaceful cat. I'm not trying to fight anybody. I ain't trying to get bit in the leg by nobody.
You're trying to fight FD though.
I'm not trying to...
Why don't you like FD, man?
I have no problem with FD. We were on the same show one day and he tried to stop me from talking once. I was like, fuck no, I know what the fuck I'm saying. Don't try to tell Brianna what I'm trying to say. Try to tell her to go fuck herself. How's that sound? So yeah. But no, I have no problem with FD. I just have a problem with 3-hour-long video explainers on white existentialism. Too much. Jason is a short king. Y'all fucked up.
We coming for you, nigga.
That's all y'all in the chat right now. That's dedicated. Y'all fucked up. But look, go to sleep. It's late where you are. Look at me. I'm your dad again. It's all right, son.
Hey man, you're the former teenage anarchist, man. Teenage anarchists want to abolish the curfews. They want to abolish bedtime.
Teenage anarchist that is the father to a 5-year-old. I am very pro curfew.
I still need to read that
for 5-year-olds. I'll send it to you.
Yo, I'd love to read that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
It was literally just called.
It's a song. I took a song title. Yeah. Everything I write is a song title.
That's tight. Yeah. Anyway, man, I'm get some food. Take care.
What are you gonna get? What are you gonna get before you go? You're gonna get poutine?
I don't know, man. Are you racist against us Canadians?
I am.
I'm
Tony,
about to get some shawarma.
I knew this, which knew it. I was this
Yeah,
close to
that's
saying
smart.
shawarma, but I felt like that would have been a racial attack. All right, Tony. Have a good night.
See ya.
Peace out. Thank you so much. That is Tony, aka One Dime. Check out his video essays. I like him. I think they're very well put together. The first time he came on the show, he had done a video essay about MMT. But yeah, I like Tony. I thought the controlled opposition was pretty interesting. Check it out wherever you're watching or listening to the show. There should be a link in the description. It should be the first link to Tony's work. He's expanding out and doing more interviews. He's got a really interesting interview with Benjamin Studebaker. I think you guys should check out. Someone says Jason is pro nap. I'm totally pro nap. I'm pro nap for me. Not so pro nap for the little guy. I'm more pro, I want to tire your little ass out. You finna climb every tree, go on every monkey bar, just finna do it all. Because when we finally get back in the house, it's gonna be time for you to take a bath, eat, shut it down. That's what I'm pro of. I'm also pro Tubi movie. I broke a rule of mine, and that rule is there's no champagne room tonight. I can't F with you people again. I've been on a bunch of shows this week. I've been doing stuff right before this show. I'm tired. I'm gonna admit I'm exhausted. I decided I'm gonna write this weekly thing. There's what you can chew, and there's more than what you can chew, and that's always what I'm biting off. But anyway, last night, after I was done with the champagne room, the other black guy in Rosarito was like, Ben's over here. We're drinking. Dude, come through. And I thought after I was done with my show, they'd leave me alone. Like, okay, they know it's late. They know I'm tired. Nigga, where you at? Come through. That's not Ben. That's the other black guy. I know what you think Ben talks about. Hang out there till way too late. For old people, it was too late for all of us. And I got home and I was tired. I was like, I'm just going to go to sleep. And I was like, but let me just turn on Tubi to see if there's any horror movies on Tubi. And there's also like really good, they have all the canon movies on Tubi. And as I'm looking at my list of movies, and I told you guys before on the show in the champagne room, I'm not going to watch a Tubi Black movie. I'm just going to watch the clips with no context because they're awesome. When that lady shoots the dude and then shoots his wife and the kid goes, but I'm just a kid. Or the grandpa that's supposed to be in a catatonic state and the nurse is blowing him and then he wakes up. That's insane. So I didn't realize I put this Tubi movie on my list. It's a very black movie. And most black movies I see take place in Atlanta. And this movie was called Illicit. And there's people in it that look familiar because you've seen them in bit parts and other stuff. But I couldn't point any of these people out. And they were like older than me, but they were fine. Like everybody was just ripped. And I'm looking these people up on IMDb. I'm like, this nigga is like 3 years older than me and he's ripped like that. Fuck, this is why no one loves me. Anyway, I do have to, I don't understand this movie. I haven't finished it yet. There's like the last 20 minutes of it. If Steve is watching, I feel like Steve has probably watched Illicit. Ridiculous movie. They're like soap operas. And they always have a just stupid premise. It doesn't matter. I'm all in for the ridiculousness. So this dude and his wife, and it's a, kind of a nice looking, well put together man and a very pretty, although very thin, light skinned wife. Really thin. And he's a parole officer. And Vivica Fox is his boss at the parole office that kind of looks like an office building, but whatever. And for some reason, all the parolees he deals with are like the finest women in LA. I'm like, okay, should have chose a different career. And he gets this one parolee that's just like really, she's like a thicker, younger version, a mildly thicker. She's kind of skinny too. There wasn't a lot of ads. Like Sir Mix-a-Lot has a line in Baby Got Back, LA face with an Oakland booty. That does come from somewhere. But anyway, this I've never seen this woman in any movie before. The parolee woman, and she was gorgeous. And you just know it's like, oh, it's gonna go bad. He's gonna cheat on his wife with this woman. And so the parolee woman is she apparently was beat by her boyfriend, and then she beat him up. And he gave her the most pull up your pants speech that I've ever heard. And it was offensive. Because basically her whole thing is like, I'm not a criminal. I was protecting myself. And they would have all these flashback scenes. And you would see the boyfriend like, shut up, bitch. And he's just like, just beating her for no reason kind of thing. And the parole guy, the family guy that's married to the skinny light chin chick, is like, you made the decision to date a felon, and you are a smart young black woman that has a degree from Howard University. You a Howard University grad. How can you be so stupid? I was like, this is how you talk to women that have experienced domestic violence? You're really not good at your job, sir. But that seems to be a theme of this movie, right? Whoever wrote it. And it's not an old movie. It's not like it's from 94. This movie definitely comes out in the post Me Too era. But, I digress. And then on the other side, his wife is like sad a little bit, even though her life is so perfect. And her car wasn't working one day, so she had to get an Uber ride to her outdoor Pilates class. And the Uber driver is like this super attractive guy that's really flirty. And she keeps leaving shit in the car. And she never goes, oh, wow, I left my purse in the car. So the guy just has to keep coming back to see her. If I've known people that have thought they left their phone and everything stops, right? You're walking and dude, I left my phone. And then everybody acts like it's an emergency. It's not an emergency. You just left your phone. Turn it off. You have insurance for it. Get another one or whatever the fuck. Who gives a shit? Now, good. We get to spend fucking a day now without you constantly checking social media to see if somebody liked your picture of your dog. Awesome. We can live a little. But anyway, she like left her purse. She left her whole purse. And the guy goes, hey, you left this. She's like, oh, I didn't even realize that. How do you not realize you left your whole fucking purse? What woman just leaves her whole fucking purse and just keeps never. Anyway, they needed to set this thing up. So the dude is like this pretty boy Uber driver. And she gave him like $10. She like tipped him $10. She's like, here's $10 for giving me back my purse that I fucking left in your car. And he goes, this would barely even get me gas, but I guess I can get some food with this. And he asked her out on a date, and she obliged. She obliges him on the date. She's a married woman. And apparently she was a model. And the dude's like, "Oh, you're so beautiful. By the way, I'm a photographer." And she's like, "No shit. I'm a model." Go figure that I get into your Uber, right? Only in LA. And so the dude's like trying to hype her up. He's like, "Oh, you're so pretty. I should take your pictures." And then she has like this friend that's kind of like Pam from Martin. And Tank is in this movie too. So if there are any black people watching, I remember Tank. Tank is in this movie, the R&B singer. And the friend's like, "Girl, you don't want to be trusting no Uber driver photographers because they be Craigslist serial killers." And I was like, that's fair. That's pretty fair. It's not like there wasn't a guy that literally was a serial killer that posed as a photographer in Los Angeles. So she goes home and she tells her husband, "Hey, I'm kind of tired of only being able to leave the house for like an hour a day. I want to get back into modeling." And the husband gets like super mad. Like, who the fuck gets mad if their wife's a model? You have this super hot wife that was a model when you met her, and he's like, "I told you, no wife of mine is a modeling." It's like, what? I mean, was she modeling fucking dildos before? It sounds like she was just a standard model. What the fuck is the problem? Parole officer guy? Chill out. He starts like yelling at her, and she's like, "Honey, you know what's I'm with the kid all day." And then they have a kid. The kid is like one scene in the movie, and then it's like, fuck that kid. The kid's nowhere to be seen. That kid is like the extra child on Family Matters. That kid went to her room, and that was it for that kid. And so um this chick, she's like, the husband goes, "No wife of mine will ever be a model. I will not allow it." And I was like, this is ridiculous. What black man in LA is yelling at their hot wife, "No wife of mine will ever be a model"? Like, who wrote this bullshit? Anyway, now I'm really invested in this book. Now I'm like all in. So of course, what happens? She forgot something else, and the guy goes, "Hey, you forgot your wig. You know, something that you shouldn't forget." And he sees her, and they go out, and this time, apparently somebody's watching their kid because nobody is picking up the kid at this point in the movie, and the wife gets with the dude, and he is just balls deep in the wife, just digging her out. And they flash back to the husband, and the husband is trying to help this woman that he just chastised like hell. That was a spousal abuse victim. And I guess she seduced him, whatever. Like I said, she's like a thicker version of his wife. And he didn't have like the passionate romantic sex scene that the wife had. They just kind of show him doing it a little, and then the next scene he's like washing his dick in this woman's sink. I was like, oh yeah, black people wrote this. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. So they flash back. Now they go to the wife, and the wife is out, and the Uber driver guy goes, "Hey, come with me to my friend's house." And she's like, "No, I can't." And I figured she'd say, "I have to pick up my daughter." But no one even gives a shit about this kid. Like, the kid was a focal point for the husband mad at her that she couldn't model. He was like, "You can't model because I pay for your life and you're supposed to watch the kid." Because that was the agreement for me paying for your life. And he and I guess instead of modeling, he lets her make jewelry. I was like, what? So anyway, the wife is extremely unfulfilled. So Uber driver guy who just gave her the business. Oh, oof. So he's like, hey, come to my friend's house. Let's hang out, have dinner. And she's like, okay, because fuck my kid. And she goes to the friend's house. And you know who the friend is? Dean Cain. Yup. Dean. I played Scott Peterson, and for the rest of my life, I'm going to look like Scott Peterson Cain. I thought Dean Cain was some kind of racist because he was like on some pro-Trump shit. Dean Cain looks like when he got the phone call, he started high-fiving all his friends. Like, man, I'm about to be so knee deep in these black women in this movie. He was so fired up. So the dude takes her to Dean Cain's house. And then there's like these other people at the house. So I'm now yelling at the TV alone at 3:45. I looked at the clock because I was like, I got to wake up in like an hour. I wake up about 4:30. And then I go, well, maybe I'll wake up at 6:30. I'll sleep in today. I'll wake up at 6:30 because I have to see how this ends because I'm yelling at the TV. I was like, it's a gangbang. Don't go to the gangbang at Dean Cain's house. And she's like super naive to the gangbang. And in my head, I'm thinking, who the fuck takes the married woman they're fucking to a gangbang on the second date? Like, really?
Because I nut quick.
That's me. And that's why I'm not going to a gangbang on the second date. Seriously. There were some of the finest black women that LA had to offer at the moment. And Dean Cain was just grinning the whole time. I don't think he was acting. I think he was legitimately pleased to be doing that scene. And you know it's a gangbang because the dude, all the guys except for the guy that this chick is screwing were like white guys. And they all had these really hot black wives / girlfriends. And they were just grinning. They were like, oh, honey, I love you so much. And then someone else would say something. They look over at like the one white dude looked over at Dean Cain's wife and was like, yeah, you are hot. And I keep yelling at the TV, it's a gangbang! It's a gangbang at Dean Cain's house. At some point, you know it's a gangbang, right? I can't be the only person to know how to identify a gangbang. I feel like gangbangs aren't surprise scenarios you accidentally walk into. And I also feel like gangbangs aren't the kind of thing you go, hey, Ben, what are you doing tomorrow? You want to come with me to Dean Cain's house? We're just gonna hang out. He's got some booze. You like scotch, right? Apparently he's got some single malt scotch. And he says you do have to bring a woman though, and a tarp. I don't know, but it's Dean Cain. It's all good. You remember Dean Cain? You don't go to Dean Cain's house and not think there's going to be a gangbang. Come on. Serious. And you don't bring someone on the second date to a gangbang. I love vagina to a fault. I am single for a reason. I'm not a cheater. I'm just stupid. But I'm a big fan of vagina. Huge fan. If I could get an iced out necklace of it like the rappers, I'd wear it with pride. And I would never think, hey, woman I just met, who I gave the deepest, most passionate dick down to, the kind where he was like, he like turned her over and he was just like, It wasn't even slow motion. It was just like, I want you to feel every fucking ridge of this meat. I can't follow that up with a gangbang. Who does that? Who thinks like that? Who wrote that? I was so offended. I was yelling, and then I felt like the scene took forever for her to realize it was a fucking gangbang. The moment you see Dean Cain, another white man with a hot black chick, and Dean Cain brings out a hot black chick, look at the dude you're with and go, did you just bring me to a gangbang at Dean Cain's house? And if he goes, it's kind of an orgy type thing, be like, tomato, this is a gangbang at Dean Cain's house, and you're a piece of shit. It's bad enough I cheated on my husband, and I came really hard. Like really hard. So hard I had to go to church the next day and repent. I came so hard that they wrote out the child in this movie. That's how hard I came in the fuck scene. I am not going to Dean Cain's house. I'm not going up these stairs with you to a weird fucking gangbang at Dean Cain's house. I signed up for you to dick me down slow and make me feel bad about it later. I did not sign up for all these people to do the same thing. Didn't. Not what I asked for. I'm a boring married woman that just jumped out of the marriage with 2 feet. And now you want me to jump, not in the deep end of the pool, you want me to bungee jump off Everest into the dick soup that is the Dean Cain house gangbang. Not cool, man. And she doesn't realize it's a gangbang right away. Again, I'm yelling, it's a gangbang. Dean Cain's girlfriend says something about a piercing because she makes jewelry. The lady thinks, oh, you make jewelry? The lady goes, I need to get a new ring for my hood. And the woman goes, your hood? And then Dean Cain's black chick picks up her leg. They're eating dinner, by the way. This is at the dinner table. She picks up her leg, puts her leg on the table to reveal her vagina where she could see the piercing. I was like, I like to change it out every so often. You know, switch things up a little bit. Okay. If that's not a signal for you're at a gangbang at Dean Cain's house, what the fuck? You're just blind. Or maybe you wanted the gangbang. Maybe you did want to accidentally fall into the gangbang. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe you wanted to play, look, who's in my butthole now? But if I go to Dean Cain's house and an attractive black woman puts her vagina on the dinner table, that's when I say, good day, sir. And I take my napkin and I throw it down and I leave. I don't know what's going to happen in that situation. I don't know Dean Cain like that. You think you know Dean Cain, but do you know Dean Cain? You think it's going to be a fucking party, right? You think it's going to be all good. Nuri says that is a great icebreaker game. You don't know Dean Cain? I want to tell you guys a true story about something that happened to me in a similar situation, but I can't because I'm on the main show. But I did run out of the house. All I'm going to say is I ran out of the house. Because I didn't know if that guy was going to Dean Cain me. And trust me, you don't want to get Dean Cained. Second date. Second date. And it wasn't like you were doing weird freaky sex with her in the first place. You didn't have like a weird fuck trapeze and a dildo wall or a pommel horse and she was doing weird gymkhana dismounts onto your cock. None of that shit happened. You had passionate, I'm cheating on my husband sex. You had that, I finally feel pretty, and the moment I come, I'm probably going to feel bad about this sex. You don't follow that up with a gangbang. You just don't follow that up with a gangbang. The vagina at the table, she just made this face. She was like, your friends sure are weird. And the one white guy, like the most nondescript white guy ever, he was probably a producer on the film. He was like, can I get in the gangbang scene? He's married to the young lady that was in that TV show, The Game. That was married to the main, they kind of had the main storyline of The Game. I can't think of that woman's name. She kind of looks like one of the Maori sisters. Super cute. Super cute. He was with her. And homegirl has her vagina out. And that girl and him, they're looking at her vagina and they're like, yeah, your piercing is gorgeous. What? Ding, 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 ding. Again, I've been in a weird situation. I've lived a life. Not going to get into all the details, but certain things were happening before I ran out of the house. And I can't tell you the whole story because it does not put me in the best light. But there was a moment where I was like, oh, I'm not in Kansas anymore, Toto. And I got to make a decision here. Am I going to participate in the Dean Cain gangbang? Or am I going to run out of here with no pants on? But I got to make a decision quick because I don't want to be rude. Uncouth. So the couple looks over and then they look at each other and they're like, I love you. And they start making out. And the chick's still like, man, your friends sure are just so open with their affection. Chick, you're like 40 years old and apparently you were a model until like 3 years ago. You've never seen a gangbang and cocaine fountains? What kind of model were you? I feel like if you model underwear for Sears, you've still seen some shit. I feel very confident in that. Wait, and she was supposed to be some runway model or something. You've never been in a gangbang? Never? You've never seen people do weird drugs you've never heard of and start fucking each other in front of you? Come on, lady. Come on. That's why maybe that's why the date felt so comfortable. He's like, oh, you used to model? Pfft, you wouldn't mind going to a gangbang at Dean Cain's house. It's gangbang nights, Tuesday. They were talking about that, like, yeah, it's been hard for us to get together for our monthly thing. When people say, okay, true story. I can say this because no one that lives near me watches what I do. One day, my neighbor told me, hey, we have this monthly get together here in the area, and all the homeowners get together, and it's kind of like a mixer. Oh, that's kind of cool. And he kept telling me about it. And he's like, you gonna be around? You gonna be around? We're gonna do it this day. It's gonna be at this person's house. You're gonna be around. And I went. I live in a community where me and Ben are like the youngest people by far. and we're not homeowners. Everyone's much older. And I went there and I thought to myself, is this one of those Dean Cain parties? Mainly because this one woman walked up to me and she goes, I've never seen you before. And she just started like grabbing me. And I was like, either this is a scene in Get Out or it's a scene in a porn movie called Get In. And I don't know which one I'm in, but either one does not play well for me right now. So I know even then it was a very but it is an innocent thing, right? There's a potluck, a lot of networking that goes on, but it's cool. It's cool. Me and Ben went to another one that happened a few months ago. Sadly, I had COVID, so I missed the last one. But they're fun. They're fun events. You get to know your neighbors, and but you don't get to like know your neighbors, right? You're knowing them like this. Like we did this gang sign thing. You knowing them like this, not like this, right? But when nothing but couples are there and they can't stop smiling, it's a gangbang. When Dean Cain is there, it's a gangbang. When a woman takes her vagina out and kind of puts it on the dinner table, it's probably a gangbang. There's a good chance that it's a gangbang. Don't make this face and look around for the punked cameras. Oh, there's no cameras at the gangbang. No. Just your memory camera. So they'd stop eating dinner. Like she went through dinner. And I'm yelling two things. I'm yelling, it's a gangbang. And then I'm yelling, where the fuck is the kid? Because the husband is cheating as well. The husband is literally fucking his parolee. Like, whoa, you're kind of a shitty guy. You're fucking your parolee. I mean, she was very, that woman was very attractive. She was the reason why I went to the Internet Movie Database. Which is like the approved way to stalk, isn't it? Isn't it? It's like stalking has become so normalized now, we don't even realize that when we're stalking. That at that moment, I realized I was stalking. I was like, I think I just stalked somebody. I went to Internet Movie Database and I saw her name. I was like, oh, and, it links you to like their social media profiles. Luckily, I have no social media on my phone, so I can't link to it. If I could have, I would have. Oh, she lives in LA. I wonder what area. How can I accidentally, on purpose, be at the same coffee shop as this woman? We've so normalized stalking with stuff like that. To the point where we say, I Facebook stalked you. Like, bitch, I just watched a show called You where a motherfucker died off that shit. Like, I'm terrified now. So the husband is banging the parolee and he does the thing that all men do when they cheat. This is wrong. We can't do this anymore. When a man says that when he's cheating, what he really means is, I feel guilty. I'm going to need you to get on top next time so I don't feel as guilty. I'm going to keep trying to find scenarios where I can accidentally on purpose be alone with you so we can do this again because you are a younger, hotter, wetter version of whatever I've been trying to have intercourse with. I ruined that relationship by literally yelling at her and telling her she can't have a life. I'll never get in that conversation with you because there's no We don't have that relationship. So I can literally just come here and unload because I'm a piece of shit. Right? That's really what is going on. And I'm watching, I'm there for it. So he's done with the intercourse, and there's just banging on the door. Who could it be? Who could be banging at this woman's door? The abusive ex-boyfriend that she went to prison for beating up? Of course it's going to be the abusive ex-boyfriend that she went to prison for beating up. It's a black movie soap opera. And the dude was like not attractive. And he was like the first not attractive person in the movie. I was like, word? So back to Stalker, Jason, I'm thinking, because I'm so stupid, I'm like, if she was fucking that guy in the movie, maybe I got a shot. But seriously. So the girl answers the door, and the guy's like, don't answer the door. Because that is actually a correct response. If someone's knocking on the door and saying, bitch, what are you in there doing, bitch? Don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. And also, don't answer the door because I'm sitting here with rock hard dick and a wedding ring. And I'm your parole officer. Answering that door puts a lot of shit in jeopardy right now, ma'am. Don't answer the door. Okay? He doesn't know his wife's at a gangbang at Dean Cain's house. But still, doesn't matter. Don't answer the door. She's got that outfit, and I'm so fucking corny. This is how corny I am. And whoever wrote this is probably my age, because this is like what corny old dudes love. So she had that thing where she was wearing like his shirt and like her little panties, and that's it. And then the dude's like, bitch, you in there with some nigga, bitch? And then she's like, what should I do? And he, of course, goes, don't answer the door. And then she like walks to the door looking all post-sex sexy. And then the dude starts hitting her. You got a nigga laying all up in your bed? Now, apparently, because she went to prison, she's living in some apartment that's not the dude's. So you can't do the whole, like, you got this dude up in my house. Like, it wasn't his house. So you couldn't even say that line. Like, why are you mad? Yeah, she's got a dude in the bed. Yeah. She went to prison because you were kicking her ass. And then she kicked your ass. So bad enough that she went to prison for it. And like, what did you think was going to happen when you went there? You think you were going to like bang on the door and she was going to be like, oh, I'm glad you found me, even though I'm unlisted? No. You obviously know there's some guy there. Walk away, Jerome. So he's like fighting the chick. The dude puts his clothes on a little because he's got to show that he's got a six-pack. Which, again, this really pissed me off because all these people are like older than me. I'm born in 77. That dude was born in 70. He was ripped. I was like, man, fuck that dude. Is he taking steroids? I'm sitting there watching it with a thing of Pringles in my hand. Fuck that dude. 3:45 in the morning. So the guy goes outside, and the dude's beating up the girlfriend, and the husband has a bottle, and he hits the boyfriend over the head with the bottle. And in real life, that causes severe damage. You're probably going to need stitches. You're probably concussed, and you should go to a doctor. But in the movies, that's like, throwing like it's like a spitball at somebody. So he hits him over the head and breaks a bottle over this guy's head, and it just does nothing. And they start fighting, and he's kind of losing the fight. And then because MMA is so popular, he puts him in a rear naked choke. And then the girl comes out with a fucking Glock, and she's like, "Let him go." And the boyfriend's like, "You ain't finna do nothing." And then she just shoots off to the side. The dude got scared and he's like, "You ain't gonna do it again." She goes, "I swear to God, I will put a hole in you if you don't leave." And so finally the dude goes, "This isn't over." This is what they always say in these movies. And then the husband now knows he's in a world of shit. His parolee has a gun. Last I checked, that's a violation. She shot said gun in a residential neighborhood in an apartment complex. He's there with no shirt on. And I'm sure if they put a black light in the room, it would look like a disco. So he's just in a world of shit. And I think, and then I couldn't even yell at that point. I was like, I'm like this. I'm like, what's going to happen? And I'm waiting for them to go back to, I got to find out what's going on with the gangbang. I got to know. Does she succumb to the gangbang? They're back and they're just flip flopping these scenes. They flop back to the lady. And finally, like the dinner party's over, and finally the people are like making out, but they're not like fucking, but I think now she knows, like it had to be so drawn out for her. She's like, "I think you took me to a gangbang at Dean Cain's house." And dude was like, yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, Uber driver, you got some big fucking nuts. Some big cast iron fucking haul them in a dump truck size nuts to be so like, yeah, bitch. I took you to a fucking gangbang. It was at Dean Gaines' house. It's Dean Gaines, it's Superman. And Scott Peterson. And he goes, "I know you like me." And I was like, ooh, I don't have the confidence to say shit like that. I know you like me because I dicked you down 2 scenes ago. The candles were going and lips were being bit and you were crying because you came so hard. Like, I know you like me. And she was like, "I don't like you. I'm married and I don't like you. And I don't appreciate you taking me to a Dean Cain gangbang." And she called for an Uber because now she's got all of her stuff, right? Now she finally remembers her purse and phone. And the Uber driver comes and Uber driver says, "Hey, is your name whatever your name is in this stupid movie?" And the guy goes, "Shut up." I was like, oh shit. I think the skinny dick down man might be showing his crazy card. And then they juxtapose to the husband, and he's like trying to explain to the homegirl. He's like, "Look, there's a gun. I need to take the gun." She goes, "You got to call the cops because if you don't call the cops, he's going to come back." He goes, "Look, I'll try to file a restraining order, but I can't do shit. We can't call the cops. I can't be here fucking you. I have a job with benefits and a pension. I think I have a daughter. I don't know if we're going to write her out of this movie and cut those scenes away. But if I do, I have a daughter. It's very good hair. It's very hard to maintain that good hair. It's expensive. How much pink oil moisturizer costs in this economy? Whew. We live in a good neighborhood. We have to commute just to get the Korean beauty salon, to get the hair care products for this level of mixedness between my wife and this little girl. I'm not losing my job and having some nappy-headed heathen running around my house just because you can't keep your mouth shut. Now, shut up. I'm not saying anything. So now she starts blackmailing him, right? She's like, "Oh, well, I want you all the time now. And a matter of fact, I want you to tell the judge to end my parole soon." I was like, oh, shit. She had an angle the whole time. Oh. The late 80s philosophers There's a lot of talk about Marcuse and the Frankfurt School and Foucault on this show. But the philosophers that I studied the most in my youth, I really tried to emulate these people. The school of Bell, Biv, and DeVoe told me in 1989 to never trust a big butt and a smile. That woman kind of had both. It was a bigger butt than his wife, not the biggest butt, but a butt big enough not to trust. A smile not to trust. They told you in 89. You knew it was a problem. You already have a wife. You already have some light-skinned child with a mane of hair. Your wife doesn't work. She sells jewelry. Really? Like, your job is really important. You cannot go around trusting big butts and smiles. Can't do it. Don't do it. Word of advice to all of you out there. Don't do it. If you're a woman, don't trust a big butt and a smile. My butt, pretty good size. I do some squats. I do lunges. I do reverse lunges. I can fill out some jeans. Don't trust my smile. I'm not going to take you to a Dean Cain gangbang, but I may be poison. Also,
Because I nut quick.
there's that. There's that. So all this is happening. It's happening. And I'm like at the edge. I'm literally at the edge of the couch. And now it's 4 a.m. I'm like, I have to go to sleep. I turned the TV off. I don't know how the movie ended. I really did. I watched the documentary before this. I've watched Tony's stuff. I don't know how the movie ended. I'm going to hang up this because we've been going for 3 hours, which is way too long. And I'm going to try to find out how this movie ends. I don't know why. I just yelled about this for the last, I don't know how long. I'm sorry if you guys are annoyed. I was not reading the chat, so I have no idea what you were saying. The movie's called Illicit. Illicit. Check it out. Jason edging on the couch like JD fans. I was too tired to even go meat beating. I'm not even trying to be funny. I was just too tired. Had I been a little more awake, I probably would have. Maybe I wouldn't have fucked the couch, but I would have thought about it. The woman was fine. So fine. You cannot. Before I go, just remember. Bell, Biv, and DeVoe. It's always made sense to me, right? That big butt and smile comes at a price. He was willing to risk it all, literally. So I have to find out in these last 20 minutes. There was 19 minutes left in the film. I have to find out how this all gets resolved. Because I think it's going to get resolved where there's going to be some sort of fight and there's going to be fisticuffs on both sides. And maybe there's going to be some running involved, but I think they're going to stay married. Something's going to happen. He's going to be like, but I love my wife. It's like, really? You were yelling at her and you told her that she wasn't allowed to have a life. I think she can do better and I think she should move on. She shouldn't fuck the Uber driver because that guy's weird. But she should move on. Dr. Claus says, "Oh wow, that was Essence Atkins. Is that the woman's name?" I don't know. I don't know anyone's name. The movie is called Illicit, and it's on Tubi. Check it out. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I'm going to try to read some of these comments while I play the end credits. I'll see most of you tomorrow. Again, if you're a patron of the show, there's a new series that we're doing for patrons. It's called The Crisis Papers. Every week there's going to be a new essay. It's for free with the format way that I did it, kind of like a magazine. For lower tier patrons, it's for sale. If you want to support the cause, it's only $5, but it helps us keep the TIR machine rolling. And on that note, have a very good night, and I am out.